first?
Well, yeah, Mike, I guess you didn't get a chance to speak, so if you want to, if you have things to say, feel free.
So first of all, I would like to nominate Al Ludwig for the position. And David, don't smile. And I would like to, I'm sorry, I thought you were smiling at my comment. I would like to nominate Al for the position and to propose that we look again at the two candidates in particular that were being vetted on Monday night. And you know, as I was watching this, I was thinking, you know, how fortunate we are to have so many good qualified candidates for this open position. And I have spoken to all of the candidates as well. And I know that we've sort of zeroed in on two in particular, and with respect to Bashir, given the circumstances of what evolved on Monday night. While I appreciate your being here, I think we kind of know that we're discussing Al and Dan at this moment. And I have evaluated carefully and I think thoroughly both candidates. I've spoken to both. And I think they're both excellent. But for the reasons that the president has described, and I agree with, I think that Al is the right person at this point, and here's why. Among other things, Al has been in the community for over a decade. Al has served on planning for multiple years. And Al took it upon himself to go out and canvass the community back in July and secure support and petitions to run for the office. And we were aware of that as well. We were aware of other candidates. And at the time, it was a very crowded field of 8 people. And one of those members of the field of 8 was disqualified. And then we began to look at the names and the people that were left. And Al was kind enough, and by the way, I do want to say I appreciate your sentiment, Al. I heard what you had to say about stepping away. I personally was taken aback by that because I really never felt that you were a particular threat. We're all competing for the 3 seats, but nonetheless, I appreciate the sentiment of that. But what I felt most was the graciousness by which Al decided to remove his name from contention, given the fact that he had significant experience and had a good reason to run, and apparently has had the opportunity previously, which I did not know. I don't know if anybody knew that. I wasn't happy about what I heard about that, to be honest with you. But that I thought that was a gracious step to allow the rest of the field to participate and compete for the seats. I talked with Dan Ferris, and I was very impressed with him. I've heard good things about him from my friend David Solly and from Angelina, and I've seen him in action. But he sent me an email on Wednesday. And that email, he asked if there was an opportunity to speak personally. And me being me, I immediately picked up the phone and I called his cell phone. And unfortunately, his cell phone would not accept any messages. And again, me being me, persistent, I called his office. And I got his voicemail. And I left a message. And to further my attempts to communicate, I sent him a text that I was available and that I was on standby and anxious to talk with him. I did not speak to him until Saturday. So from Wednesday until Saturday, Dan was unavailable, which is understandable. He's got a busy caseload. He's a busy attorney. He works for a large firm, and he's got a family. But that I said to him when we finally connected was a little troubling because communication is critical, and we are expected by our constituents to be responsible and responsive, and that, for me, is a very big factor. And okay, I'll admit I'm retired, and I've got a lot on my plate, and I serve on a lot of different boards and commissions and have a lot of responsibilities, but first order of business for me is to be responsive, and I am very responsive. So we had a great conversation, and I was impressed with Dan, and I told him as much. But I also told him that I questioned why he didn't run for the office like the others back in July. And I also asked him how many meetings he's attended. Hi, Dan. And he had indicated that he'd been to a council meeting or two. So I said, well, I'm going to be completely candid and honest with you because that's my nature. I think that both you and Al Ludwig are fine candidates, and you're both coming from the same place. But I feel aligned at this moment with Al because of the things that I've just described, his longevity in the community, his experience coming to many, many, many council meetings over the years and knowing how we function here, and being a part of the Planning Commission for multiple years. He brings a lot of institutional knowledge within the various communities that he, as a builder, has relationships with. And lastly, that it was the president's wish that he join us on council. And I have great deference to our president. And so given the choice between the two fine candidates, both qualified, my view was that it was Al's opportunity for all the reasons that I've expressed. And Dan, I said, if you will be patient, I think 2 years from now, there'll be an opportunity for you to run for the office. You'll have 2 more years under your belt, and you'll have 2 more years of residency, which I think the minimum requirement is 2 years, and I think you've been here for just about 2 years. So you're just on the cusp of being available to be on council. So having said all that, again, I just think we have 2 great candidates. And the last concern I have is, for years, and I've been I may be the longest serving continuous member of this council. I don't remember ever having more than one attorney on the council. I think it was Ralph Sossin back in the day. And suddenly we find ourselves with 2, 3, and maybe 4 attorneys. And I think part of being on the council is a diverse group of individuals with different perspectives and different experiences, and business is a big part of that. And most of the members of this council have been business people. And it's great to have legal advice and legal minds on the council, but I don't think that we're in a position where we need 4 at this point. And what Dan brings to planning is lacking in the legal department, and so he fits well in that position, which is one of the reasons that I think he was appointed to that position. So
Mike, didn't you say you were an attorney?
I play one on television.
I thought you said in a past life you were an
No,
attorney.
no. I joke around a lot, Abby. You'll get to understand that. So anyway, long story short, I know we're at an impasse. We need to break the impasse. I've been down this road before. When I was appointed back in 2010, it was a 3-3 split between me and Lou Eads, and it was messy and ugly, and I explained that to Dan and to Al, and I said, I hope we don't go down that road of debating back and forth and getting into personal things and why this one's better than this one, because it's just messy and it's public and it's unnecessary. So what I'm hoping for is that somebody in this group will align with the president and myself and appoint Al Ludwig. And Dan, you've got an opportunity to do great things on planning, and I hope that you'll continue to do that.
Did you just make a motion?
I made a motion to appoint Al Ludwig. May I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay?
Okay, we have a motion on the table. We have any further discussion? Okay, Dana,
Roll call.
please.
Trustee Yates.
For,
It'd be
Voting
for
What's the
for
motion?
Al Ludwig.
no,
Trustee Hanson.
Yes.
Trustee Solly.
No.
Trustee Salzer.
Yes.
Trustee Smough.
No.
President Goldberg.
Yes, doesn't matter. Okay, so where we thought we were gonna be.
Angelina, let me ask you, because you spoke eloquently last night and with compassion about what you agreed were virtuous qualities in Al Ludwig. You had experience with him, he welcomed you, he invited you into his home. I know that Dan is a friend. This isn't a popularity contest. I would ask you to reconsider.
See, I don't think that my definition of friends is the same as yours because Al's my friend, but it doesn't mean that I can't look at criteria and apply a set of facts and make an analysis of which of those facts reach the conclusion that is most aligned with the future of this.
But you did say you were
village.
torn. You said it was a
Of course
very
I'm torn,
difficult
but like, I wouldn't
decision.
call my friend and say, please step out of the race.
No.
So I'm just letting you know, like, my friendship is not like, you have to be loyal to me and vote in my way. So I think that's where we differ because I've disagreed with you on more times than I have not, and I still consider you my friend. And I hope vice versa, but doesn't mean that I'm gonna align with you. And I didn't talk to either candidates, or any of three of them, even though they reached out to me the last 2 days. And I read both profiles, and I thought about both candidates that I was torn between, Al and Dan, and what they said and what they offered. And the open candidate spot has been appointed to the infrastructure committee. Al has said he is bored with planning. He does not want to do infrastructure. That includes stormwater, sidewalks, and road. And that's where we're gonna put him. Back to the things that he's doing on planning. You all say that Dan is great at planning, and we need his expertise, and we need his leadership. Well, why wouldn't we then promote that leadership onto the infrastructure committee that is newly created and combined with all these different facets of infrastructure for the village? Then I looked up what Leadership Detroit was, which Dan was selected to be a nominee. It is an extremely prestigious class of of leaders who are in the Detroit region, sponsored by the Detroit Regional Chamber, of multifaceted people that are executives across the region that solve complex problems that have plagued the region and looking for innovative and creative solutions in order to overcome challenges that are systemic in economic, social, and municipal areas. And I could not be more proud that we have one of those people in our community who has applied. And I think Al and I think Bashir would both agree with that. And hold on, you asked my opinion. Don't be upset when I do it.
I know.
And so I'm looking at what would we be losing on council? We would be losing that dynamic skill set. And Al himself has said that he thinks that downtown should be further developed. And I have confirmed on Monday that we can have non-council members sit on Main Street. I think there is a place for what he wants to do. And I think there is an incredible opportunity to bring Dan's skill set. Have we ever surveyed the council and asked what kind of bachelor's degrees we have, what kind of doctorate degrees we have, whether we overlap in our experience, what kind of education we have. Are we Michigan State? I mean, the fact that you said there's 3-4 people with Juris Doctors on the council, oh, because we're all advocates? So advocates in professional life tend to be advocates in their volunteerism
Okay.
and advocates in
Okay.
philanthropy.
Okay.
I think the point that you made as well, that he was not available to answer your call, is extremely egotistical.
Wait a minute,
He
wait a
does
minute,
not
wait,
know
stop.
you.
No.
And so for
No.
you to expect him to
No,
call you
no,
back
no.
during the week
Angelina,
is insane.
let's
I don't call back my
Angelina.
friends during the week.
Angelina, please.
Mike, let her finish. And
You had said
I
that
received
because
an
he did not
email.
call
No,
you
I
back
said it was a
till Saturday.
concern. Don't amplify it. I could go on about something that was said about Al not reaching out to somebody, and I felt it was disrespectful to be attacking Al the way 3 of you attacked Al. I really found it to be
Hang on,
disrespectful.
when did I attack Al?
When did I attack Al? I just said he was the
No,
most
You know what?
sincere
Mike,
person.
We'll have to,
specific example.
we'll have to play the tape.
Michael.
Abby said,
No,
I'm
not Abby,
disappointed.
I'm asking, you just said the 3 of us, so please say what I said.
I think you were, you've come into this with your mind made up, as I knew you would, and you're advocating without reasonable consideration.
But you
I
said
see
that I
that.
attacked somebody. I'm asking you what I
I
did
said
to
the
attack
group,
someone.
I felt the group was on attack.
Who's the group?
David,
No, I'm asking direct
David.
questions.
I'm answering your question.
Okay, so
You
the-
and Abby and Angelina really went after
Why?
Al with
How?
strong
Outside of Abby,
questioning.
how?
Strong questioning where I
What
did not see
question?
that. Well, I'd have to go
Angelina
back.
asked the same
All right,
question to every person.
here's where the attorney part is going to be problematic, because I will come back and give you absolute responses. I can't remember every word you said, but I did find it was very aggressive. And I didn't sense that with the other candidates.
The only thing that, the one question that I asked Al was, based off of your experience working with other communities, where can we improve?
Yeah.
Because the truth is everybody knows that when I sit up here, I constantly talk about the need for improvement, the constant inches we can gain. So regardless of whether or not the candidates get elected, I want to get that feedback. The same thing I asked Bashir. Hey, when you walked around and you talked to the residents, that's a potential loss if we don't ask the question, what were their top priorities? It's the same thing. Al
Okay.
came in and talked about
Fair enough, fair
what
enough.
he brings to the council, and it's
Fair
the
enough.
experience of working with other communities. How do we improve our community?
Respectfully, I don't think we can afford to debate this. I think we either have to determine that there's any movement in this group, and if there isn't, then I will nominate, I will suggest that we eliminate the 2 candidates that we're debating right now, and I'm prepared to nominate another candidate. Now, I've been through this, and we've done 3 roll call votes before we got to that. And if no one is going to move, and it appears that no one is going to move, then unfortunately, I would say we're at an impasse, and it's immovable.
We've been talking about this for hours. If this were an important topic for you to cover, why weren't you here on Monday? You knew we were pointing something.
What difference does that make?
Makes a
I'm here
lot of
now.
difference.
No, it doesn't.
So, but your decree now is we
My
need to make
decree
this
is that I
decision
watched the
now.
meeting, hoping that we would come to a
But
consensus.
that's not fair.
It's
That's
not- it's
fair to
absolutely
say
fair.
So, Mike,
today,
real
right now,
quick.
I'm done with this,
Okay.
and we're
We
done
just had a
talking
vote.
about
No, I'm not saying that. The president is going to make that call because he's
it.
leaving
You can't
town.
defer when it's convenient, Mike.
Hang on,
Excuse
real
me.
Excuse me?
Excuse me.
Please stop.
That's not fair.
You know what's not fair?
Excuse me?
I don't like where this is going.
Excuse me, let me just speak for 1 second. I would just like us to adopt a norm in this discussion that one of us talks at a
That's
time.
fair.
And wait
I'm
for
not
the
gonna be
other person.
scolded
Excuse me?
By the newest member of council.
Mike, let me finish.
Okay.
Please let everyone say their piece and pause before we can have an animated conversation if we just allow each person to finish. I would also like to recommend that we limit our remarks to a couple of minutes because we have a planning commission at 7 o'clock.
Right.
And we're going to lose 3 people at that point. And maybe not you. But anyway, please. So I don't know who last spoke, but have at it.
No, I'm trying to be productive here. I recognize we're on a deadline.
So, take charge here. So we have three courses we can go. We can continue to debate and possibly reconsider the existing candidates. We can decide if we want to consider other candidates that have either reached out to someone individually or has actually applied. Or we,
Wait, can you repeat that, number 2? Mike
I
said
don't
we're
believe
only-
anything in the charter binds us to nominate only people that have applied.
But I asked Mike on Monday if it was open,
That was not.
and we all said no.
Those are two different things. The application process isn't opened, but the charter doesn't specifically outline the process for appointment. So there is nothing in the charter that's binding the process for appointment. Now, the council decided to go forward with an application process. We set a date when we would close that application process. But that was a decision that was made to open and to host that application process. It's not part of the charter that states that you have to do it in that way. Do you have anything?
Yeah,
clearer there?
I would agree with that. So the charter does not limit the trustees and the president's ability to nominate and appoint somebody that are based on the applicants. You guys can go ahead and nominate and approve somebody that is outside of the applications, as long as they meet the eligibility requirements.
Okay, so why didn't you guys let the council know on Monday? Because when I asked, was there anything else I needed to study or review for this meeting? Is the application process closed? We're just going to review the candidates that had already applied.
I think, I want to speak for Meg, but I think Meg said we're not accepting any more applicants.
Yeah,
Because you
we're
guys, we have that 30-day time frame. Now, if you guys can't agree, that's different, right? You guys have
Okay.
attempted to try to appoint a trustee, but you guys have to do so within 30 days. If you don't, that's understandable. You can't do it, you can't do it. But you're not limited to these applicants. You're going to go outside of that. Nowhere in the charter does it state you have to select within those applicants. Excuse me, I'm a little groggy.
Okay, so we understand that we have the opportunity to eliminate the candidates if we can't. Like I said, I've been down this road. I know how this.
And you kind of
so-
open up again to other applicants.
Yeah, my suggestion would be in the future that if it's this same scenario again, that we wouldn't put a deadline for applications, because if we're continuing the consideration for who would apply, there may be people in the community who missed it, who believe that that deadline is closed and that opportunity is gone, despite the fact that it is open.
The only limitation is that with 30-day window, right?
No, I'm saying like, put it open with no deadline, and then eventually, or set it at the 30 days. But we create this false expectation on the community that applications have closed, so people may have not filed the application, or they may have not reached out for consideration.
Understood.
Yeah, and I specifically emailed the office when it was posted, because I thought it was a typo, because it was circulated the Friday before Thanksgiving, and it closed the Thursday after Thanksgiving, and I thought that was really tight, and I knew that people would already be out of town, and then you're like, we can only have it for 2 weeks, because we need the application process to close, so council can review the applicants and vote on it at the meeting. And so if that is the intent, then it should say, but there is still opportunity to nominate someone who doesn't apply. So maybe an application process doesn't align with a council appointment, if that's the case.
And with respect, could we fix that one later?
But that-
Because right now.
Yeah.
And that would be a council decision. So the application process that was put into place was the same process that the council decided to use previously. So council does control your own application process. If you didn't even want to have an application process and you just wanted to bring nominees, that would be up to you guys to do, because it's not aligned in your charter.
To be honest, I don't recall in the past, Pam, whether we ever had an application process. And when there was an appointment on council, that was because of a vacancy, when Tom Morrow left, when Brian Gordon left, and we in the council would reach out to some of our colleagues that we know and have been active in the community and active participants and volunteers, and query their interest in being on council. So I think the bottom line is, we're at this impasse, and my hope today was that rather than arguing about it, and pointing fingers. I'm simply saying I watched the meeting, and it's unusual that we can't come to consensus. We didn't, and so I'm here. The results would not have been any different. I would have said the exact same things that I said on Monday as I'm saying tonight. My feelings about this are the same. And it's not in any way indicative of unwillingness to be flexible. I'm simply saying I think at this point, Al is the choice of the president and the better choice for this particular opening.
I'd like to jump in and restate my reasons for supporting Al Ludwig.
Point of order. Never mind. It's fine. We considered Al, and we voted on it.
I wish,
But that's
but we've got a motion and a second on the table. We're in discussion.
No,
we voted.
we already voted.
Failed.
Okay.
No, you guys
Okay.
are having.
All right, so I would say
We
then.
need to decide if we're gonna have movement on our current candidates, or if we're gonna go outside the box, or we could continue to discuss this with the hope that changes someone's
Okay.
mind.
I'm going to make a motion for Dan Ferris.
Support?
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have motion support. So again, discussion,
Yeah, so,
Talk to us a little bit about that.
yep, and the reason that I wanted to is so I could open up for discussion. I think that there is a misnomer that I respect Dan, and there was a consideration of the word friendship. I think there is a misnomer of what the relationship is between Dan and I, because I was the one who initially brought the motion for Dan and have openly supported him going through this process. I met Dan at a council meeting, I don't know, 2 years ago, and he expressed an interest in getting involved within the community and being passionate about certain things, including pathways. And so because of that, and because I have always tried to recruit people and volunteers for our community, I took an interest to say, Dan, here's how to get involved, and I'll reach back out to you if there's ever an opportunity. An opportunity on the Planning Commission happened, and I let Dan know. He applied, he received it. He's been serving on the Planning Commission for over a year, roughly about the same time as Al has. Over that period, I have respected the way that Dan has analytically approached issues, and so when this vacancy came up, I thought he would be a great candidate. It has nothing to do about friendship, it has to do with belief in the talent within our community and recognizing it. And our friendship has never been anything outside of that. Every conversation that we have had has been about volunteerism within the community and about changes within the community. It has not been going over, I've never been to his house, he's never been to mine. The only place that we've seen each other outside of these walls is the Village Green for activities where both of our families are there. It comes down to merely the fact that I want somebody who is eager to get involved and serve the community in the capacity that I saw the first day that Dan spoke, and he has continued to do while serving on the Planning Commission. And honestly, that is why I continue to advocate for it, because I believe that our decision in electing him today is not just to serve for the next 2 years, it's to spark that fire, to have somebody who will serve us for, not necessarily in this capacity, but serve our community for years and years to come. Having the opportunity to shape the future for not only all of us, but also his vested interest of his children, where he's going to be raising his kids on this very green space. So that's really, I just wanted to clarify that it is not some prior established relationship that we have that I'm trying to bring him on. It is merely the fact that he was a hand raiser, and I continuously gave him a platform to pursue that contribution to our community.
And I would like to say, I respect that, and I respect you. And for clarification, I also have no personal relationship with either of the two candidates. I've never been to Al Ludwig's home. I don't know if you've ever been to my home, maybe for one of the FCA charity events. But, so we aren't, this is not at all about a personal friendship. And just to clarify, since you needed to clarify yours, I hear you. And I think we've all spoken on these two candidates, so.
The only question that I would raise for those considering against Dan is just earnestly, why not? Because if the next decision is for us to go outside of the candidates who are currently, or the applicants that are currently before us, I don't know, I just need to wrestle with that one more
Okay.
because,
Why don't you allow me to suggest the other candidate?
We
But
have a
at
motion
first,
on the
Before you do that,
Okay,
we don't
okay.
actually have a motion on the table. That's what David Sully just said.
no, I made the
Oh, you
motion.
made a motion, it's been seconded.
Okay.
Yep.
And we're in discussion.
Yep.
As I said, I have nothing against either candidate. I just, as you, have made a series of evaluations based upon the information I have before me, the experience, longevity, and history of the two candidates. I'm not indicting one for not responding quicker than the other. I'm simply making that as a comment because there was a similar comment directed against Al for not reaching out to somebody. And if you don't know somebody, you may not reach out. But we're nitpicking. So I think we're at the point where if somebody else has anything else to offer, if not, we should vote.
I have a question. One of the concerns I have is, I mean, regardless, if one of those gentlemen picks up the position here on the council, there will be a vacancy on the planning commission. As a trustee in this village, I feel responsible to ensure to the best that I can that each of those commissions and boards and committees that help run this village have talent, have the right kind of talent and skills to do their jobs. I've felt very strongly for a number of years that the Planning Commission needs an attorney. I think that we can't all rely on the village attorney to support the Planning Commission. My experience, going way back to when I was the chairman of the Planning Commission, is that having that helps them do a better job because of the nature of the work that they do. I am concerned about removing that from the Planning Commission, because to the best of my knowledge, there isn't another lawyer on the Planning Commission. And like you, I've watched Dan operate, and I think that's what he provides to the other members of that group. So I just want to put that out and wondering if you share that concern or...
So, thank you, Pam. My honest opinion is that coming into this community as a young, eager person to get involved, an eager person for leadership, I've seen when I first came and started attending these meetings that we talked about we're not getting new fresh faces to volunteer. There's another organization within our community that also struggles to get fresh faces and new volunteers. And in both of those experiences, what I've found is that when we create ceilings for young talent, they don't get involved, or they walk away from the organization, or in this local government. So I have a bigger fear about creating ceilings, telling somebody that they're better served on the Planning Commission than here, despite being super talented for whatever reason. Because if they're raising their hand to say, I would love to serve in this capacity, if we create the ceiling to keep them on the Planning Commission, we could lose them on both. And so for me, beneficially, I would love to retain the talent. So I have less concern about losing that skill set on the Planning Commission, and more about losing the talent overall.
But you would agree that that same concern would apply to Al Ludwig?
Well, Al said that he wants to step down. He's not even sure he's going to finish his term with the Planning Commission, so I think it's less of a consideration. He also said that he's not going to run in 2 years. And so for me, and again, I don't mean this negatively. I do not mean this negatively. I see somebody who we're lighting the fire under to continue for years versus somebody on their last hurrah for volunteering for the community.
Yeah.
And that's where my vote is going, is somebody that I have that sustainability over years.
You know, I share your concern about providing opportunities for people. I mean, that's the business I've been in for a number of years. I get that. When I have this hat on, I am concerned about the Planning Commission, the Historic District Commission, the ability of this village to have people in the right place doing work that we need them to do. That takes precedent over their needs to be as a part of the council, particularly when, from a skill set standpoint, we might be creating some redundancy on the council. Think about that. We have to function as a team here. This is our first big test. Can we figure this out? Granted, we will have a seventh member, a tiebreaker, but hopefully, we will not conduct business on a 4-3 basis. I don't think we will, because I see everybody here as a strong individual, but I'm troubled by our inability to make some forward progress here. I don't want to have to support Mike's suggestion that we open this up and look at a third party. I think that's not serving either of these two people. But we need to move on this one, and somehow, because right now we're dug in. I'm unlikely to change only from the stewardship standpoint. And hopefully I've explained my position on that one.
Can I ask a question? What prevents this council from appointing an attorney into the vacancy that Dan would leave if he got appointed?
Nothing.
Okay, so we have the power to put an attorney on planning if you think that skill set is so needed. There currently is an attorney who is the council liaison to planning. So for your concerns, I think they're covered.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you the
I
same
don't,
question.
But I hear you.
Because you can't put another, Dan is a different, like, you can't fill it with another attorney?
We could, but remember that there's a pool of people who are interested. We also recruit. That's a president's appointment that's supported by the council. I think we would want to look for another attorney should Dan move off of the planning commission. Absolutely. I just don't see them hovering out there ready to drop in.
And they're not going to hover when
I know somebody an attorney who's interested, who serves on ZBA right now, who wanted to be on planning.
And I have a question, because you asked me the same question about Al.
Yeah.
Why not Dan?
I'll say it again. I think that we have 4 similar skill sets, professional training, on a 7-person board. And that is counter to my feeling that we should look for diversity of professional background or point of view, experience in the village, volunteer work, experience being a resident here, and commitment to other organizations in addition to government roles.
Does Dan not have that?
Well, I haven't looked at his resume today, but my recollection is he's got good planning commission experience. Yeah,
His resume was peppered with community service and philanthropy.
in the village.
He's only lived here for 2.5 years.
Well, but you're making my point for me. I think for me, just
Okay,
speaking
I
for
see.
me.
It's longevity.
Don't let her
it's
finish.
residency.
Let her
It's
finish.
the opportunity, because someone's lived here for a while. I'm not saying go out and find a 40-year fossil to join the council. That's not it. But I'm going to look twice at a person with a certain longevity over a person with a shorter length of stay here. And that's given due respect to the challenges of being a parent. And frankly, it's really tough to do much else besides work and be a parent if you're going to do a good job at both of them. And you know that better than everybody.
Before I came on council, I spent 16 years in the FCA, 11 of which I was the president. And that's typically the way we have recruited. We've recruited a lot from the FCA. The FCA is a proving ground to get to know and understand the community. What's lost here for me is this. With all due respect, the president drives the council. And the president was elected with more votes than any of us. And it's his wish that Al Ludwig be elevated at this point. And again, he was extremely fair and complimentary towards all candidates, really. I mean, we had 4 people, and they were all eloquent people. But the 2 we've settled in on, of the 2, David's given good reasons why he wants Dan to stay where Dan is, and it's not a demotion, it's not an insult. Again, Dan could have run for an office and chose not to. So this is an opportunity for someone to join us, and I think it's time for us to try to come to a conclusion. Otherwise, I see this new council as riddled with problem, because we are debating.
I can't, Mike, I don't think that, all right, I'm going to speak for a minute. First of all, I've been listening to what you guys are saying. Pam, I'm a realist and a practicalist. And with all due respect to the 2 candidates we're considering, regardless of how this shakes up, I'm pretty confident we're going to be looking for 2 new planning commissioners.
Yeah.
Okay? So I think that's just a given going in, all right? So this whole, who goes here, who goes where, with what we've put them through at this stage, however this shakes out, we're going to be looking for 2 new planning commissioners. So we're losing the attorney either way. So what I want to do is I want to resolve this. And Mike, I appreciate your deference to me as the president, but my vote is still only 1, and I personally prefer my trustees to be the ones that make our decisions. And my vote should be, unfortunately, the tie-breaking vote. And it's 6:15, and I want to resolve this today unless you guys want to come back in the next 48 hours to do this again, because I'm leaving on the 20th, and if that's the case, then, and I assume you leave, we'll be left to just 4 of us to figure it out. So let's decide if we are going to open it up to anybody else, even though we have a motion on the table, and we can vote on that, and still doesn't mean another motion for the same candidate can't be brought up again. We don't, again, David, I personally, as the president of council, do not believe we need a motion in order to conduct discussion. So if that was the reason for the motion at the time, then we could all vote and then go on with the discussion which I want to have, which is in the next 15 minutes, determine if we're going to come up with another candidate. And if we're not going to come up with another candidate in the next 15 minutes, then I'm open to going back to discussion, and let's just say I'd like to see what happens in the next 15 minutes, if there is any interest in bringing in a third party. If there isn't, or we're respectful of the candidates we have, or you want to have to come back again to allow anyone who's watching right now to have an opportunity to come at the next meeting, I can tell you that I have had people I'm sure all of us had, so I have had people reach out to me and say, hey, would you consider me for the vacancy? So I do know that there are other individuals out there that are interested. We have a couple different areas that we can go to look for candidates. We can look for candidates that are existing in other commissions. We can look at the candidates that ran for current seats right now. So are we interested in considering outside this group?
I'm just troubled because, Pam, you said that if someone has a full-time career and a young family, they won't be able to give what they need to give.
That's not what I said.
Can you restate what you said then?
So we're not in court, and the relationship that I want with you as a colleague on the council is not for me to have to parse every word, because you're going to circle back and nail me on something I said that was careless or it wasn't exact. I'll paraphrase. That's as best as I can do.
Oh, yeah, paraphrase is fine.
Just so you know, you may not know this, but I'm a mom.
I know.
I'm a grandmother. I raised a child as a single parent. I really know about what it takes to do that.
So what
Just
was
to
your
establish
comment?
my credibility. I would like what I said, the spirit of what I said was, I have a great respect for the challenges of being a parent. Holding down a full-time demanding job and being a parent is really challenging and doesn't leave a lot of room to do a lot of other things. There are exceptions, of course. Some of us have enough resources they can hire a full-time caregiver. Other families have a grandma living in the house. But that's what I was saying. It wasn't intended to be judgmental.
Okay.
It was intended to reflect the realities of raising small children and how important it is that that's what you do at that point in your life. That's what I meant. Does that help?
Yeah, but the way it seems is that all of the applicants are here again tonight.
Are what?
So all of the applicants are here again tonight. So if you're using the small children full-time job to eliminate someone's
No, I'm not. I
commitment?
don't go there. It's
Okay.
illegal, and it's not anything to
Okay.
do with what I said. Please
Okay.
do not go there.
Okay, and we've heard from the applicant that you support that said he did not want to campaign because of the time he didn't have. So if we're gonna go into sacrificing time, it's not a
I wasn't
good
making
road.
an argument of that.
Okay.
Al, did Angelina reflect what you said about, was that an accurate reflection of what you said?
Said excuse me, I withdrew my application because there was 8 candidates. And number one, the first thing I did was I called David and I asked him if he could support me because I felt between the two of you with your support that I would have a pretty good chance of being successful. David said he couldn't support me because he was going to support you and he was going to support Abby. And without David's support, I didn't think I could win. That being the case, I decided I was going to withdraw my application. I didn't have the time to go knock on every door in the community. I did say that, and it's true. I wish I did. I wish there was more time, but I felt that my chances of winning without David and your support were negligible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The last thing I would say is that I agree that it would be nice for us to come up with a resolution of this problem, but if no one is going to move, then in the spirit of timing, I would like to make a nomination.
Hold on, we have a motion
There's a
on the
motion,
table.
yeah.
Say it again?
There's a
We have a
motion.
motion and a second, unless they want to withdraw the motion, we could do that. Since you had your discussion, if you want to hold on that vote.
Yeah, no, I can withdraw,
Because we could still have that
because
vote
I
again.
just wanted the
It's only,
consideration.
it's only 6:20. And we still have a few minutes. So, Mike,
I would like to make a motion to appoint Linda Hiller Novak to the open position. Linda is known in the community, been in the community for decades. She's a member of the Planning Commission. She knows all of the candidates here, has watched and absorbed all that's going on, and has come forward and said, I'd be honored to take on the position of trustee. I would like to be able to leave either planning or ZBA, where she sits in both. She's a very admirable and hardworking real estate professional. She brings a lot of great expertise. She's well-liked by all of us. And with all due respect to the 3 candidates that are here tonight, if we can't come to a reasonable solution of this problem, then it's time to move on to the next candidate. Linda is standing by. If we would like her to come in to chat, she's willing to, but I think we all know her, and she has indicated a willingness to step up, and I think she would be a great addition to council. Can I get a second to my motion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay?
Can I ask a question? So we'd be losing a person off zoning and a person off planning?
No, she said she would be willing to give up one of those positions.
Well, no, it's
No,
how.
you have to give up
both.
To give up both.
Yeah.
So that leads us
Yeah.
back to the problem
Yeah.
that you had, which is losing people off
No,
commissions.
so be it. I mean, if that's because she serves in so many different capacities, as do I and Pam,
We can't worry about
Right.
what is the result of our
right.
action.
We need to find the right person to
As-
fill this
as-
spot
as
tonight.
Angelina said, we have plenty of talented people, we have
Yeah.
people that have been trying to get elected. I don't have any fear that we're gonna have a problem backfilling
Yeah.
any of our
Me either.
positions.
So my concern, I guess, is that I was not made aware that we were considering people outside. Because again, in full fairness to the process, the fact that we had application deadlines, we received the applications, and then at the end, Angelina did specifically ask, are we only considering these 4 candidates? Yes. Do any of them have to show up? No, I think we already know enough. Granted, thank you all for coming again. That until, David, you and I had our conversation earlier this afternoon, I was not aware that we were going to be considering additional applicants. So I guess I kind of struggle with processing that because I still have a little bit of heartburn over the fact that we're simply going back and looking for somebody else without having an opportunity to discuss with other people that we may feel should throw their hat in the ring as well. I don't know,
We can only take one candidate at a time, right? And I've been contacted by everybody that ran, as well others. And there are people watching tonight that are former members of council that would love to be reappointed to council.
So,
And so, with all due respect, regardless of what everyone thought, I did reach out to Peter this morning to get clarification. And knowing that we were at a roadblock, and knowing that our president is leaving, and I'm leaving, that we need to get this resolved tonight.
That
So-
wasn't communicated to the entire council.
Well, it doesn't need to be communicated to the entire
but,
council.
okay, hang on though.
But in the spirit of transparency, if it's not
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
communicated to
whoa,
us.
whoa. Wait. Don't start with that. Transparency.
So-
Why don't we
If you
post
wanna-
it for 3 more
I don't want to
days?
argue with you about transparency.
No, okay, I was talking, so I'll finish my thought, which is the fact that, again, like, I appreciate that you reached out to Peter, but again, we need to be cohesive. So if it was, hey, if we can't land on the candidates before us, we need to consider, like,
David, we're not allowed to talk to each other.
no, we're not. That's my point.
Okay.
Is like,
So I reached out to Peter to verify what I knew and David Goldberg knew about the possibility of coming to a unfortunate tie here again. And because I've had the experience of going through this, I knew what the process was going to be. And if this happens, there is an alternative, and that is to appoint someone else. And that's simply what I've just put on the table. So there's nothing that's not transparent about that. We do not have the ability to talk in back rooms about who the candidates may or may not be. Suffice to say, everybody that ran has reached out to at least me. I don't know who has reached out to you.
no one.
Well, okay.
That's my point.
Whatever.
Wait, so
What can I say about
everybody who
that?
ran? Mm-hmm. So Anthony Schoeneck.
No.
And Chris King.
Anthony didn't really run. He just
Chris
put
King
it-
reached out to you?
Chris King, absolutely. Fred Galash, absolutely. Mark Hankey, well,
Didn't
Mark
run.
Hankey didn't run. Everybody reached out. And so I spoke to each of them, and I told them my personal opinion of appointing someone who had stepped off council or won miserably or lost miserably. And realistically, I don't think I could feel comfortable bringing them
Yeah.
up as a fill-in. But I do think strongly that Linda Hiller Novak is a fine member of the community, and I would only say, why don't we vote? Or who objects? Why don't we talk about objections? Other than you're being, I hate to say blindsided, but surprised. And I can only say about that, you've only been on the council for one term. And so this is not the first time this has happened.
Yeah.
So we've seen this and prepare ourselves for it, and I was prepared for it, that's all. No offense to you, but that's where experience comes into this. So
Right, which is
And I
also
apologize
merit
if I
for
didn't
me.
call you to ask you about it, but
I'm not interested.
you haven't talked to me about,
I'm not interested in that. What I'm saying is that if it's communicated to get us all on the same page, then again, we're in a better spot if it's
Yeah.
like, can be communicated, again, no criticism to staff, but like, if we do know that we've communicated at the end of the meeting
Yeah.
that we're only going to be considering four
I hear
applicants.
you.
Hang on, let me finish. And then after that conversation, there is further clarification that we will communicate or will consider people outside of that. We'll be on the same page if we have an email sent out, just in preparation.
Just because we're bringing staff into this, I would like to say, those aren't, first of all, these are not conversations that I've had with council members. This is a decision between council, so to consider someone or to not stick to the application process initially and to bring in a tiebreaker, those are council decisions. That's not something that I would be privy to. It's also not appropriate for me to be commenting on any choices at all, because whoever sits in that seat will be my employer, will be my boss, one of my 7 bosses, and so I have to stay neutral to that. So staff wouldn't be the one to communicate anything. I don't know where everybody's head's been at. I've stayed completely out of this, as has staff, because this is a council decision.
right?
Is it your recommendation that we vote to not follow the application process?
Well,
before
I
we
have
do
no
this?
recommendation. This isn't coming from me. I'm not part of this. I am neutral
Well,
in
there isn't a
here.
process. We don't have an application process when it comes to replacing a trustee. There is no process. We have guidelines, which aren't even a resolution. We have guidelines for our appointment process for bodies and commissions. There
Okay.
is no guideline, there are no rules established by charter, ordinance, or even suggestion amongst council on how this process works, because this process doesn't happen all that often.
Okay.
We have changes in commissions all the time, and our guidelines that we created for those positions, based on its inherent nature, already is a 2-month process. We figured that out from the beginning. So by its existence, we can't even follow that process. I don't know if we really opened an application process. We posted an opening for the position and said, if you're interested in the position, apply, and we had 4 people that apply. The knowledge, it was out there, and I think it was pretty known going in that when I won, that my seat was gonna open up. And when that happened, as has happened to apparently Mike, and maybe not you, but I had several people reach out to me and say, hey, would you consider me for the open trustee spot? And I told them all the exact same thing. If you're interested, put in an application so that we know that you're interested, and we'll go from there. Clearly, several of those people that reached out to me didn't do so.
Right.
But that doesn't change the fact that there were other people that were interested. And so there is knowledge out into the community that the seat is open. And we had a public meeting 2 nights ago to discuss that matter. And if anybody was super interested and was watching, they would have seen that we didn't come to an agreement. And notwithstanding what Meg said, someone still could have reached out and said, hey, can you still consider me? Peter?
And Mark Hankey and Chris King and Fred Galash did so. So they're not among the candidates that we're talking about.
I was just addressing David and and Angelina's comment of this concern that we're not following a process.
Right.
And there isn't an established process for this. This is a unique situation because we are putting somebody into an elected position, which means we are now serving as the electorate. And that's a far greater duty than when we're appointing, someone to one of our bodies.
All right, so I made a motion for Linda. Was it seconded?
I did second it,
Okay.
and we haven't talked about Linda at all.
All right, can we discuss Linda?
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've already suggested what I suggested and the reason for the
And let me say
nomination.
one more thing. If and again, I don't tell anyone how to vote or act, but again, if you, as part of your decision-making process, have concerns that opening it up to a third person is a reason to not support them, then that's certainly your prerogative. But I just wanted to clarify, well, for the record, as well as the comments made, that we do not have an established process, with the exception of there has to be an appointment made within 30 days from the opening. And that is the extent of the charter.
Well, let me speak in favor of Linda then.
Okay?
I realize, I don't know who knows her or not. Linda Novak is a Realtor. She and her son Frank are in business together. They sell a lot of houses in the village. Linda and her company underwrite expenses on a number of public events that we have in the village. Her business partner's son Frank sits on the Main Street Board and is a great member. Linda has been on the Planning Commission for some time, and she was the one planning commissioner that volunteered herself to serve in that joint appointment at the zoning board some time ago as well. And I've watched her over the years. I think she would slide in very well to this council. And my experience with her is she's thoughtful, she's smart, she does her homework, and brings a different perspective than anybody else in the council. So I find that attractive.
Anybody else? Linda is one of the persons I had not had a communication with. So that one is news to me. Linda would definitely be an asset to this body. She's also a planning commissioner that we would be losing as a result. As I stated from the beginning, and of course it wasn't anything that I was going to not sway from, but my preference from the beginning was that this appointment came from the Planning Commission. So that still stays within that confines, and we would be losing Linda from planning as well as the ZBA, but that opens up other opportunities. Linda sits in that very, very coveted, if you really like village volunteerism, because it's the only seat that you sit on two of our largest boards and have a voting capacity. So that seat would open up for the Planning Commission. So I would have no problem supporting Linda if that was a means of getting us off of dead zero.
So I'm struggling with this one because, again, I love Linda just as I love Al. Like, I hope, my biggest fear out of this conversation is I feel all of us up here have, is that any of this comes off as anything other than making a hard decision. If it can feel personal, I hope it doesn't, because I respect the hell out of you. And I feel the same way with Linda, and I just want to, I wish I would have had the opportunity to talk with her about what her goals are. Another thing that was important to me is an interest to run in 2 years, because again, it takes some time to onboard into this role. And so to just have somebody with an interest of 2 years and done, I don't think we're maximizing the opportunity of this.
And I want to address that, because you said that a couple times.
Yep.
And I kind of have, I have complete opposite of that. I don't feel that it's our duty to give anybody a head start. You ran for the first time and won. She ran for the first time and won. She ran for the first time and won. It's not hard to do your homework and campaign and run for council as somebody who hasn't been on council before. And we've had someone try who's been on council numerous times, our last 3 elections, that hasn't prevailed. So I'm not sure that it's our duty to give someone that advantage or to prop them up to be the next person, because the next person really should be someone that the voters select. And frankly, I'm not even sure, having going through this now for the first time, that I love how the charter works. And I'm not so sure that when this happens to a trustee, that we shouldn't have to do something different, whether it's a special election or some other process. Because, I mean, this creates animosity amongst us when we can't come to decisions. I have grave fears of where this is on our first attempt at anything on the next 2 years, where this is gonna leave us. I think at this stage, whatever decision is made, it's gonna leave a bad taste, and it's something that we're just gonna have to work through regardless. So,
I look at it like this. We are, I can get Linda on the phone right now. If you want to talk to her, you know Linda, David. If you're not comfortable the fact that you didn't know about this, I understand that. But we've got to make a determination tonight and not belabor this, because this looks bad to the community, to be honest with you. It's like when someone goes on Nextdoor and says ridiculous things about the council. We have got to make a decision. We've got several great candidates. They're all experienced and known to us. There's nothing wrong with Linda. And this is not anything more than filling this vacancy. No one can predict where we're going to be in 2 years. None of us know whether Al would want to run again after 2 years. He may or may not like being on council. Same with Dan. He may say, hey, after 2 years of being on council, I like being on planning better. We can't possibly know that. So I don't think any of those are fair litmus tests. And so at the end of the day, we've had a vigorous debate, and now it's time to make a decision. And we can postpone this for no good reason. Linda will come in here right now if I call her and ask her to come in. She told me she'd be available, but I honestly said I don't think it's going to be necessary, because I think David and Angelina know you well, think highly of you. Pam knows you well, thinks highly of you. And so Abby doesn't, but Abby's not going to know any of these candidates or any of these people, so she's going to do whatever Abby is going to do. End of the day, I stand by my suggestion that Linda is a great alternative, because we aren't coming to an agreement on the two existing planning commissioners, so it's time to reach to another.
I do find value. You said I find no value in postponing. I don't necessarily believe that to be true, because you identified several candidates, and postponing would provide an opportunity to reach out to those candidates and actually have a conversation.
They could come in right now. They're all watching
all right,
this.
well, that's not happening tonight, and again, that was the question, was are we gonna go outside of this? And if we're gonna go outside of this, then we're probably coming back. So I'm going to call for the vote. We have a motion and a second. Unless somebody's withdrawing the motion, we have a motion to appoint Linda Hiller Novak to council. So if we can do a roll call vote. Dana?
Trustee Sulzer?
Yes.
Trustee Sally?
No.
Trustee Gates?
No.
Trustee Salako?
No.
Trustee Hansen?
Yes.
Trustee Short?
Yes. Doesn't matter. Okay.
I'll make a motion to nominate Dan Ferris
Support?
for trustee.
Support?
Second.
No.
Second.
All right, so I think we've come, based on what I just heard, we're pretty much so comfortable that we're not going to consider anybody else.
Well, there's a motion and now there's a second, so we
No,
have to see
no, I
this
understand
through.
that, but
Okay.
when the new person failed and then we're back to one of the old persons, that I'm gonna take from that there isn't either someone else that would be suggested, or it's a moot point if we're gonna go on the basis that we're not straying from
Okay.
the people that are already being considered.
I
And that's
wouldn't-
just gonna waste time.
I wouldn't mind considering other people, I just want to have the time to think about it. Like, I literally studied before I came, between the last 2 days. Like, and, like, so many people reached out to me, to you, so many people didn't reach out to me. So I didn't talk to anyone between the last 2 days.
Well, okay, but,
And you even said, who does Abby know? So she should have the ability to reach out to these people too.
okay, but we're still in a position where we as a body know a lot of people that have been serving this community. And if you ran for council, it's your responsibility to do your research and determine who are the members of the community that are contributors and who are participants and who are sponsors. And this is not a training program. And so with all due respect, I disagree with that. And I find it outrageous that we're going to sit here and go round and round on the same issue. I'll bring out another candidate. If Linda Hiller can't win your support, then I'd be happy to bring out another candidate that reached out.
I think, so again, I'm not going to speak for anybody other than myself. A no on Linda is not, if we're going to consider candidates outside of them, and several have self-identified for you, I would like to reach out to all of them, not to all, I will reach out to the ones that have reached out to you so that I can have that conversation and make an educated vote. Because as of right now, it's just like, all right, well, let's villainize anybody who votes no on any of these candidates because you won't come to a conclusion. Like that's how it's being postured right now, is that we're being difficult because additional people want to be considered and we're going through them one by one.
I'm not
No,
saying
that's,
it's diff- yeah,
no,
I'm
I'm
just saying
saying,
difficult. I'm just making a conclusion that if that's our position for the night,
yeah,
then I would rather just, look, I'm willing to try this one more time before I have to become the president. So I'm gonna try and let my council work this out one more time. And if that means, because we have the same situation tomorrow with our ZBA, we have a 7 o'clock meeting in here. If you guys want to do this one more time at 5:30 tomorrow, and anybody wants to communicate with anybody else that has been interested, including those that have applied, then I'll go ahead and call the special meeting and we can just end this right now. I'm willing to try
What
it one
about
more
9
time.
AM tomorrow?
We,
You have to have 18 hours.
we need 18 hours to notice.
Say it again?
We need 18 hours to notice the meeting.
No, it will be tomorrow. It would have to be at 5:30 again. We would have to make it work. We would have to do it quickly.
Fine.
I'm doing it to see if there is a third person that we all as a group can be comfortable with, and we'll leave it at that.
I won't be able to make it,
You won't?
no.
Okay.
How about let's talk about the candidates that are a consideration.
We have a motion on the table, should we?
Well, okay.
Yeah.
You want to vote on the motion that's on the table?
Or no, are we allowed to talk about anything we want?
The discussion is open
There's
right now,
Linda.
technically, to be talking about Dan.
I'm saying if we can't come to a conclusion, and another motion is not going to bring us to a conclusion, then let's talk about the candidates that have reached out, and I'm happy to share names. And if anybody feels that we can get a consensus on any of these names, let's do it. Does that sound fair? Is that, yes?
I mean, again, if we're gonna have to come back tomorrow, then go ahead and mention the names.
Well,
so
but
that those
Angelina just
people
said
at
she
least
can't.
know that you've considered them, and anybody else that apparently would like to be considered for the position still has an opportunity to reach out to Meg and let them know that they're gonna be here tomorrow and give us their pertinent information so that if we had to try and reach out to them tomorrow, we could. But let's,
If the discussion is concluded regarding
We
the
should-
motion on the table,
Yeah.
then take a roll call and then move on to the next discussion.
let's call the vote.
Trustee Solly?
yes.
Trustee Hansen?
No.
Trustee Sulzer?
No.
Trustee Gates?
Yes.
Trustee Salaplo?
Yes.
President Goldberg?
No.
Now you can open up the discussion.
Okay.
So,
Does the president wish to talk about other candidates or not?
so, now that that's off the table, and before I adjourn this meeting and call a special meeting for tomorrow,
Can I just interrupt one more time? Linda Hiller is here right now. She's,
how does Friday work for you, Angelina?
I'm not pertinent to this conversation, but I am not in town on Friday. I'm in
That's
St.
fine,
Louis.
and
But you
yeah, we
can absolutely
can do this.
convene without me.
Absolutely.
David,
Yes, sir.
can I interrupt to say that Linda is here? And if trustee Sally has questions or concerns, this would be an appropriate time to take 5 more minutes and try to resolve this loggerhead?
No, Mike, because that's already off the table. We voted on that. I don't think it's an issue of whether David knows Linda or whether Linda's qualified. I think David's position, which is, I can respect, is that we're sort of coming out of this in a weird way. We were on the record 2 nights ago and said it really wasn't open. Now we're on the record again and we're saying, I guess we have to open it up. The issue is, are we gonna have a time, is there a time tomorrow that works? Is there a time Friday that works? Are we going to attempt to,
It doesn't appear like your clerk is available for Friday, right? Tomorrow, okay.
That's okay, I can cover it, though. I could clerk if I had to.
Angelina, you have a conflict.
Sorry, tomorrow, yeah.
Are you available at all tomorrow?
Like during the workday?
I don't know. You
Yeah.
weren't available for 5:30. I just wondered if there was any other time.
Yeah, I mean, everyone should be consulted. Does this work? Yeah.
I can make it work.
Why can't we reopen this while we're here with the candidate that we were just...
Do we want to nominate some people that reached out before the application process closed?
We don't have...
No, I think it's
Anybody
just,
can
yeah.
nominate
There weren't any
anybody
other
right now. If they get
Right.
nomination and support, we can vote on it. I personally am not following any guidelines.
Then I would like to nominate Linda Hiller Novak to the position, and she's here to address any concerns.
I know, but we voted and it failed.
But she wasn't here, and David's concern was that he would like to talk to
No,
her.
David correctly identified what my issue was.
The issue is fairness, not qualification.
I'll move to nominate Chris King.
Support?
I'll second.
Okay, interesting. Have you spoke to Chris? I mean, obviously Chris ran.
I spoke to him.
Good number of votes.
I spoke to Chris.
Yeah, I spoke to Chris. I mean, I spoke to him before our appointment process, and I knew that you wanted to pull someone up from planning. And I told him so, and I knew that was important because I've heard it for the 4 years, and I knew that he would have a difficult time being appointed because he does not serve on a board.
I'm going to withdraw my second for the moment. I'm going to withdraw my second. I'll speak to Chris if he gets a second.
I'll second Chris. He's got a similar background to Linda. He ran. He invested his time in running a campaign. He doesn't have he has a different background, but does still come with a similar, background as Linda. I know he's not served in the community, but this is someone who has gotten involved and shown that he has the energy to be involved in this process. That's important to me. It's important that someone has recently invested themselves in
Yeah, no,
what
I
it has taken.
know.
Well, I'm explaining. I've been very quiet, and it is important to me that someone has invested themselves recently. And this is someone who is, also sells homes in the community, who is raising a family in the community. He is fiscally responsible. He's a CFO in his real estate firm. We just talked on Monday about having some pretty grave funding challenges in the community. and how we govern. And that's someone who's got a skill set that could be very important for how we might work our way through that.
Yeah, I also was thinking about him because you said we have enough attorneys on council, you're looking for a diverse skill set. You want people to sit here, represent a cross fabric of the community. You're looking for someone who looks at challenges and ideas in a different way than we already have. So that to me came to mind, and that he wanted to be on council. He has shown that he has campaigned, knocked doors, put up signs, stood at the precinct for 14 hours in the cold, asking for people's vote, and went headfirst into a very crowded campaign and was unapologetically pounding the pavement every weekend. And he has small kids, and he has a full-time career, and he still made the time and energy to do so. And that speaks volumes.
I spent some time, and I have heard from Chris and talked to Chris, and I have respect and admiration for him. My slight concern is he hasn't been a volunteer in any capacity. He's newer to the community, and I'm really stuck on how we can arrive at a conclusion about 3 members of the Planning Commission who really are more tenured, more experienced, and having another member of the council who is completely inexperienced, I think is a problem. And as much as I like Chris, I'm troubled by how we got here, because we really had a lot of thought and a lot of time and effort put in the previous candidates. And Chris also was not selected by our constituents. Now, again, he's new, not as well-known, but that to me is a little troubling.
He's a balanced person.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And,
I understand,
you know, based
but
on what-
I,
based on what we were told, we're staring down insolvency in 4 years. So my concern is what's been done perhaps is not working. So maybe we need a new perspective. I mean, insolvency is grave. So maybe having someone with a background managing the finances for his organization would be a welcome skill set to help us work through this. I'm trying to be open-minded, Mike, I really am. If it's a skill set consideration.
Yeah, yeah,
If it's someone who, you know, doesn't have a background that is very representative here,
yeah.
there's someone with a completely different left turn opportunity to look at the problem in a different way we don't have.
But unfortunately, he's not here tonight either, and we didn't really give him a notice to be here to further scrutinize and discuss his passion for
Certainly have
this.
people that
did.
know him.
Say it again?
Well, we certainly have people here that know him because
Yeah.
we're
I mean-
prepared to support him, and
We just came to know him in a
Right,
very,
yeah.
very short period of time. I can't say that I know him well, but I was certainly impressed with certain things that I gleaned in our conversations.
all right, well, then let's call the vote. We have a motion and a support to appoint Chris King as the open trustee. Roll call.
Trustee Solopolo?
Yes.
Trustee Salter?
I'm very conflicted here. I really wish we would have taken the time to talk to Linda.
Do you want me to come back to you?
Yeah.
Trustee Gates?
Yes?
Trustee Hansen?
No.
Trustee Solly?
I think for the same reason that I voted no on Linda, I'm gonna vote no here. I want to talk with the candidates.
Trustee Salter,
No.
President Goldberg.
No, I'm going to vote no, because it doesn't matter. So, look.
I can do 4 tomorrow.
Mark Hanke. I'll nominate.
Same position. So I want to figure out if there's a way that we can get together one more time. Because I do want to give some of these other candidates an opportunity to communicate with us that don't know us, even though they've already been voted on and denied. But I do want us all.
Is there a time that would work tomorrow?
Yeah, just to be clear to the public, I am running the West Maple PTA bingo tomorrow night at West Maple, and.
Why don't we all go there and we'll
I was
vote?
gonna say, it's the only event that I plan for the PTA. It's at 6, I have to be there at 5:30 to set up. There's 225 elementary school kids registered. So I cannot, be here due to that commitment with the PTA.
When will you be done?
It is 6 to 8.
Okay.
But we could do 4, if I can.
Does 4 o'clock work for the rest
I
of
can be
council?
there at
I can
4.
make it work. I can make it work.
I can.
Okay. That gives us enough time. We can go ahead and notice it. We'll meet again tomorrow for a special meeting at 4 o'clock here in council chambers.
And just to clarify, this is open to anyone. So
Right.
anyone listening who is a resident for at least 2 years of Franklin is allowed to be, correct?
And they own property, or their spouse does, and they are not in arrears to the
As long as
village.
they're resident.
Resident, sorry. They don't have to own property, yes,
Correct.
yes.
All right, it's 7 o'clock. Before I adjourn the meeting, I am going to call a special meeting of the village council for the purpose of appointing a new trustee to council at 4 o'clock on December 12th, 2024.
All right, well, since it's 7:04, let's go ahead and start our regular scheduled, or I guess our week early scheduled meeting for the Planning Commission of the Village of Franklin. We'll call to order. Can I get, we'll go from left to right. Al, please start.
Present?
Linda Novak, present.
Dan Ferris here.
Stuart Wooters, present.
Pete Halleck, present.
Paul Bragman, present.
All right. And we have our council liaison person, I believe, here as well. Awesome. Welcome. So can are there any changes to the agenda that we need to be aware of for tonight? I know that you had we were planning on doing a public hearing tonight, but unfortunately due to public announcement restrictions, we weren't able to get it out in time. Is that correct?
Correct,
Or-
because they changed for the holidays, the whole month of December and the end of November completely changed. I would literally had to get it in the night of the meeting.
No, I understand.
So what, can we do that for our next meeting then? Is that the general thought?
Let's move it to January.
Okay, yep.
All right. Yeah, thank you. Any other agenda item updates that need to be changed, or can we get a motion to accept the agenda, adopt the agenda?
I'll make a motion to accept the agenda.
Second.
Adopt the agenda.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Okay, minutes for the meeting of November 20th. I abstained from this, but any comments or questions with regard to the meeting minutes?
Thought I had one, I can't find it.
I did not have any.
Okay.
Got to call you back. I'm gonna have to call you back.
Any,
Oh, okay, so, yes, I do have one.
all right,
Page 2, item number 7. Public comments were opened by Chairman Wooters, who was not here, so, yep.
thanks. Okay. Okay, so correction of,
That's it, yep.
okay. Any other comments for the minutes from last meeting? Okay. Can I get a motion to accept the minutes?
Motion to accept the meeting minutes from November 20th?
As
Second?
corrected, yeah.
As corrected. Okay.
Each second? All right.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I have to abstain, I wasn't here.
And Linda and I abstain. All right. Okay, so now move to the Planning Commission official report. So council liaison. David, I believe this is your
First.
okay.
Yeah.
Awesome, welcome.
Thank you. So just a couple of questions that I'll have, and maybe Stuart, this is something for you and I to tie out on, but one of the things that I would really like is for you and I to have an established relationship so that going in, before we have our Monday meeting for the council meeting, that we're kind of have an expectation of any questions that the Planning Commission has or anticipates, as well as kind of what we anticipate of the agenda. That way I can better serve and prepare, or even bring up the questions to the council to kind of help facilitate that, so we come in better prepared, aligned, and just more efficient overall. So that's largely just kind of what I wanted to provide for the report is any ideas that you have to help this relationship of the council liaison to better serve you, please let me know, and I'm very open. So thank you.
Yep, no problem. Thank you. That's a good idea. That's a two-way street too. So, all right, cool. Let's see, actually, sometimes the village minister also speaks around at that point. Is there anything from council that we need to address that we haven't necessarily put on the agenda, or?
No, our last council meeting, as you walked in here, we're still working on filling a vacancy. So there really wasn't a lot of planning discussion at the last council meeting, other than confirming your recommendation for approval of the lot split. So we have yep, that's pretty much it that I have from
Okay.
Us.
Okay. All right, sure. We haven't moved on from.
I apologize.
Hey, it's all right.
So we did bring up, David Goldberg in the last meeting had brought up when we had the representative from Extenet, he had mentioned a memo that was provided by Extenet, if that could make its way to council so that when we receive the small cell tower, we're able to do a comparison to see how it's been incorporated. That's the only update.
So I believe the email was forwarded by the village attorney that night when he, for Extenet. But I think we're talking about that memo here, right? So,
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that that's made its way to council.
okay.
Yeah.
So do you know, David and Megan too, often we had voted at our last planning commission meeting to forward the letter, both the fence letter in R3 and the lot split.
Yeah.
You know, and Chris writes a letter, and typically we discuss it, and we will, often there'll be a motion, and we would like to send Chris's letter with those recommendations in it to you guys. And I'm just curious what the pathway is for that. And I know you had asked at one time, you know, can you guys summarize what you're doing? And Chris does it wonderfully for us, but often it doesn't seem to end up in their hands.
So the letter, we can use the R3 as a good example here, did
Yep.
make it to the draft agenda, was reviewed by the legal committee, which
Okay.
is gonna have 3 members of council.
Yep.
At that point, the members of council decided to remove it from the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
So, it did get submitted over, it was on the draft agenda, during the legal committee meeting, it is common for a multitude of reasons to bump or move something. And when
Sure.
we were looking specifically to that in the meeting we went to in December, even items that made it on our agenda ended up getting bumped on Monday evening, given the length. And so we were looking at sort of the weight that was already on that agenda and where it
Yeah.
fell. So I can say that, when it was forwarded to me and that was recommended by planning, I made sure that it was on that draft agenda. It does still have to cross over that final threshold to get approval from the legal committee to make it on the final
Sure,
agenda.
so, okay, and that's consistent with my understanding. And I guess a little bit of feedback, especially for, Stuart and I try to stay on top of what's going on and what the preferences are and, Megan, your concerns and everyone's concerns. But to give us the feedback that it didn't just disappear into a black hole, it helps. It's nice to know that, it did get received and hopefully it'll be on a future agenda.
So that's a good point. So basically, what I would be helpful for me is during the council liaison report or at some point, if an item goes to council and then the legal group meets and it's no longer, not put on the agenda, meaning letters weren't forwarded or given to them, that'd be nice for us to know at that time or know when.
I think that I'd like to correct something there, so we're very much on the same page. That letter did not go to council. Not
Right.
all of council reviewed
Right.
that letter. That letter went to the legal committee.
Right.
So when you said a letter goes to council.
Well, it goes to committee, right? So if the committee rejects putting it on the agenda and we know that the rest of the council's not getting it, the rest of the council didn't get it.
Right.
So then,
That's right.
if they watch our meetings and then we say we're gonna send a letter out and then it goes to legal committee and legal committee doesn't pass it on to council.
Yep.
Then we have you'll be here when we're having this
Yeah,
discussion, so
right.
Exactly.
you won't be out of the loop.
Yep.
However, there are other trustees that will be potentially out of the loop, having watched our meeting between.
I think that's a fair point, and also David sits on the legal committee and is a member of council. So if that
helps.
were to happen in the future, when David comes in and is able to give his report, he could always attest to that.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll be sure to incorporate that into future updates.
Right.
awesome.
It's fair. We recommend, the letter would be, is that fair, Chris? That the letter, and even the letters you prepare for us, I think they are worded, they actually say to council, to the council.
Well, what I usually do is I rewrite it Right,
address it directly to council.
right. So it leaves us under the impression that council's going to see it. And now we understand, and for those who don't, it's taken me years to figure that out, right, that there is this pre-review process.
You're right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, sounds
fair
good.
enough.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so as far as the chairperson report, apologize, I wasn't able to make the last meeting. I don't really have much to report. Pete, I don't know if you wanted to take, as vice chair, would like to say a few things at this point, or?
Right. Only, interesting and lively discussion about the appointment for trustee has impact on our planning commission. And to the extent that you're interested in village politics and village government, a good one, I think, for all of us to watch. There were good points brought up and covered a lot of ground. And it may well have an impact on us. I think we have a couple of candidates for trustee on our commission here. So that's all I would have to say. And I don't know, Dan and Al, since you guys were there, I had to leave after the reports were moved on. If you guys had anything to bring up about the balance of the meeting.
I don't have anything else to add.
Yeah, all right.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Pete. Anything else? All right. So commissioners, any reporting or things you'd like to share with us from a commission that we need to know? Okay. Zoning,
No meeting.
no meeting. Okay, communication.
I don't have any update. I'm waiting for the, well, I think Meg was going to update us based on, I think the last time when she spoke, that she had a.
So a communication plan was drafted and distributed to council for review, even though it's not something that requires council approval, just to solicit feedback on that. But as I mentioned, our last council meeting, a number of items didn't make the agenda. That was one of them. A number of other items got bumped from the agenda. So I would expect that we'll have further conversation around that at the January meeting. There are some other items, such as a council code of ethics, that I think will probably take precedent over a communications plan. So I don't want to overcommit and say for sure that we'll talk about it at our January meeting, but I know that's the plan right now.
Okay.
I think as far as it affects this board in particular, I incorporated some remote participation policies that really model what they're doing at U of M for remote participation, which involves not writing in or live, chatting during a meeting, but does allow for a telephone call in. And the reason for that is it maintains some credibility, some accountability. When you're on the phone, you have to use your voice to tell us who you are, and you're not just, it mitigates having someone behind a computer screen posing as something else. It also keeps the record a lot cleaner. It's difficult for our clerk to be administering live comments as they're going through. Also, public comment's not a back and forth conversation, and you can get into that mess with the live texting. So we are looking to incorporate remote participation into all public meetings, but it would be done so on a phone call basis. So we'd be in a Zoom platform, and someone would be able to call in and share their feedback.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other comments for communication? We'll move to budget and expense report. So as you know, this year we're, the last 3 months where or 4 months, we have a lower budget, at $4,500 less than previous year. Any questions about the existing budget?
Only question I have is, Dana, are we just a month behind, so we don't have November on here?
Mm-hmm.
We got November's the day I sent out the packet, so that's why they wasn't included.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. That was my only question.
Yeah. If we had met next week, possibly we would.
Next week would have been out there.
And I do apologize for getting your agendas out late, but I was on training all last week.
Understood.
No worries.
Okay. Now move on to public comments. You're kind of lonely out there.
Any more, Dave?
Welcome to the crowded planning commission meeting. It clearly means we need to have more controversial topics to get people here.
Interesting.
Interesting topics. Emotional. Okay. For old business, so discussion on amendment to the cellular ordinance. Now, my last planning council meeting I went to, they had the cellular ordinance in front of them. Extonent had submitted to our lawyer, some questions or comments. Chris, I believe you have already reviewed that for the previous council planning meeting. And we had a discussion here with regards to that. And my understanding from Pete, correct me if I'm wrong, Pete, was that we felt comfortable for the most part with what we had already submitted to council. So catch me up, what else do you want to discuss on here? I'm assuming.
Well, subsequent to the October 16th meeting, we received the information from Wally Haley, who is the Extonet's attorney, and he's a communications law expert, I guess. And he had some comments on the small cell wireless portion of the ordinance. And so Meg and Peter and Mr. Haley and I met with him on November 27th to go over his comments. Based on our meeting, some revisions were required. They fell into basically two categories. One was the scope of the review process. We determined that, first of all, special land use review is not authorized by the Act, the Small Cell Wireless Communications Facilities Deployment Act. And the scope of site plan review is more limited than we initially thought. There's some aspects of review that have to go through administrative review rather than site plan review. So we'll go over that in a couple of minutes. And then some of the requirements that were actually carryovers from the existing ordinance that I thought we could sneak in through the back door. We couldn't sneak in through the back door under Mr. Haley's watchful eye. And he thought that they were superseded by the FCC. So we had to delete a few of those requirements. So if you want, we can go through those changes right now. That probably would be the appropriate thing to do.
These are all underlined items,
Yes,
right?
if you look at the
Yeah.
marked up version.
Yep.
I submitted two versions, a marked up version and a clean version. So if you start on page 4 of the marked up version, first thing, if you look at the bottom of the page, one thing you'll notice is that instead of referring to the Facilities Deployment Act as Act, I forget what number it is, we now refer to it as MCL 460.1301. And that's because we're going through the recodification process, and the American legal tells us that's the proper way to do it rather than referring to the Act number. So you'll see that everywhere that I previously said I referred to Public Act 365 of 2018, now it gives the MCL number. So now turn to page 5, and under item B, Village Review Authority, items 1, 2, and 3, all of those items relate to what I mentioned about site plan review and special land use review. So we've taken out the special land use review and inserted site plan review where that's applicable. And so that's required for installation of new small cell wireless communications facilities and modifications to increase the power budget of existing facilities. But administrative review is required for proposals to co-locate on existing support structures. So that's what we determined is what's allowable by the Act. And routine maintenance and replacement of existing equipment are not subject to village review. So that would be where they are just going out to say, I don't know, fix something, I guess.
But that wasn't the intent. Our intent wasn't for them, if they fixed something, that they would have to go through a site plan review.
Pardon?
That wasn't the intent, though, I believe, is that.
Correct.
Is that if they had to fix something, they wouldn't have to. It was mostly if they were going to increase the power budget
Right.
from what they've already approved, right?
So that village review authority, I think, is consistent with the state law now, so I'm pretty comfortable with that. And then in terms of the approval procedures, item C, beginning in the middle of the page, we divided that into two sections. So item 1 deals with site plan review, and we give the procedures that are right out of the Act for site plan review. And if you notice right at the bottom of the page where we had the dollar amounts for applications, the advice from both Peter and Mr. Haley were to, rather than put the dollar amounts in, just say an application fee shall not exceed the amount specified in the Small Cell Wireless Communications Facilities Deployment Act. So that way, if the dollar amounts change in the Act, we don't have to change our ordinance. And then on the next page, item 2 deals with what you do if you have to go through administrative review, and that just refers to chapter 1440 of the village code. So that is the chapter that deals with how you submit to the building department. And then item D at the top of page 6 gets into the requirements. So this is the second aspect where we deal with the actual requirements where we may have overstepped our bounds a little bit. But item 2 deals with co-location, and we had some requirements in there that the attorneys felt that rather than put those requirements in there, we should just put the language in that the applicant shall use the alternate location if, as determined by the applicant has the right to do so on the reasonable terms and conditions, and the alternate location does not impose unreasonable technical limits or significant additional costs. That's the exact language out of the Act. So rather than be specific, which would be my preference, unfortunately, their preference is to use the language out of the Act and go with that language. Understood. Under the item 3, location in a historic district, there's just one change, and that is in item C, where we talk about small cell wireless communication facilities located in a historic district shall be concealed within or behind architectural features of buildings or located where they are not visible from public roads. They suggested striking the part about not visible from public roads because that's probably virtually impossible to achieve. So that's what we're going, that's why that's being struck from the ordinance. And then going on to the next page, page 7, maximum height. This is the one case where Wally Haley thought that you could require special approval, and I still don't understand why he thinks this, but nevertheless, if he's agreeable to it, I'll put it in here. But if the proposals that exceed the maximum height requirement shall be subject to special approval pursuant to section 1268.32. So rather than a variance, he thought that we should have a more rigorous review process, the special approval process. And then minimum setbacks, item 6. Let's see here. It was thought that we needed a procedure for adjusting the setbacks that allowed for the planning commission and the village council as part of the site plan review process to adjust the setbacks. And so that's what that language in the underline achieves. So as part of the site plan review, you would be able to consider the circumstances on the property and be able to say, well, maybe on this particular piece of property, because of the topography or the position of the buildings or things of that nature, maybe a smaller setback would be reasonable.
That wouldn't be something zoning would give as a variance?
Yeah.
Well, the thought at that time, at that meeting, was that it would be better if it was done at the site plan review, because they would have the knowledge and, you know, of all the ramifications and the circumstances on the site. So I suppose it could go, you know, be considered in a variance situation as well. It could go either way. I think in
Don't
the
you think it would
ideal-
have to, Chris? Because if
Pardon?
don't you think it would have to? Because if anything else similar to where come down the pike in the future that required a similar variance, then,
Yeah,
you know, we take them out of the
Kind of sets a
picture.
precedent.
Yes,
yeah,
it certainly
yeah,
does.
yeah.
yeah, I could go either way on that one.
Because we have, so, within the last year, we've had a situation where an individual received council permission essentially, but not zoning permission, to do something, and then that opened up a can of worms with regards to, like, well, will this council have, if they approve it outside of zoning, is that considered legally non-conforming?
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe it should be left in the zoning board of appeals bailiwick.
I mean, we can always make a recommendation to zoning and as part of this,
Right.
which is, I think, and you're a member, we always have a member of zoning on the planning commission,
true, too.
so we have an advocate.
even if we at least have some kind of a provision that it'll have to be a joint meeting of the site planning commission and the zoning.
Yeah. Yeah, as we discuss it tonight, that is probably the cleaner way to do it. Why don't we strike that particular sentence then?
Seems right.
Any other comments on that? Thank you.
You got comments?
I was saving my comments until Chris ran through it, but
Go ahead.
Pardon?
I was just saving my comments. Linda asked me if I had comments. I was just saving my comments until I thought you were going to run through it all.
Oh, okay.
But if you want to do them as we're going, then I think you could easily amend the language in this to say, as a requirement of site plan, may, upon receiving a recommendation from planning commission and permission from the zoning board of appeals. And then you
Well-
got it. Or and approval from the ZBA.
I think probably would be better just to strike the whole sentence, because you're already have that option for seeking a variance.
I'd be fine with that too.
Let's see, number 9 was a minor change from changing the, from principal structures to accessory structures. Number 10, Mr. Haley pointed out that usually the structural specifications are provided at the building, when the building permit is applied for. And so we modified that a little bit to reflect that, and also struck the words using the best available technology, because that's sort of a loaded phrase that is, nobody knows how to define that. So, and then number 11, Mr. Haley felt pretty strongly about this one, striking the first sentence there. These things, small cell wireless, are just a utility pole with some equipment on it, so he said, what could a long-term maintenance plan include, is what his comment was. It'd be better to just have in here, identify who's going to maintain it, and make sure that that's taken care of. And so that's what we've done, rather than call for a maintenance plan, because there probably isn't going to be too much
Of a burden.
as part of a maintenance plan. And then number 12 is being deleted because that's in the purview of the FCC. And I think when you go to the next page, there's a couple of other ones that are, I think, number 13, some provisions there are not authorized by the act.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So I know we put this in specifically because a lot of our past meetings and council meetings, we heard specific comments of people being worried about it. Is there anything else we can do or have to communicate out what that sort of output is in a way that is accessible to residents to make up for it?
Not that I know of, no.
So they don't create, I mean, you can't like go to their website and find like their output kind of, I guess I just don't understand how it works on their end, so that we're monitored. I remember like we talked about it sort of being like a monitoring system for us that we like, villagers at least felt like they had, keep an eye on it, there's nothing we can do.
I don't think so.
That's disappointing.
Item E deals with the application requirements. Sub-item 1 is the same issue that we dealt with early on about striking the special land use review. Item 3 deals with security, and we've shortened that to simply refer to the small cell wireless communications facilities Deployment Act as in terms of what the village can require as security. And item 4, certificate of compliance. This is also where the FCC comes in. 4, 5, and 6 all have to do with what the FCC allows, and
Chris, you've got under E, you have a 1, 2, 3, 6, 4, 5, 6. So you got a numbering problem going on here.
yeah, I think that's cured on the
Cleaned up on the clean
I'm
copy?
looking at the clean.
Yeah, clean's cleaned up.
Okay.
So, that pretty much sums up what the changes were.
Can we go back to page 6?
Sure.
Top of the page, item D, 2,
Yes,
where
the co-location.
this sentence that Wally added is, to me, really, really bad. Totally one favorable on the side of them.
Well, that's straight out of the act.
Why do A, B, C, and D have to come out?
Well, it makes me uncomfortable if that helps, but
But this says they can, in their opinion, if they need to change it, they can change it. And
Right.
it doesn't require anybody's approval. It's just their opinion, their reasonable terms based on, doesn't impose unreasonable technical limits. I mean, it's 100% one-sided, that sentence, I believe. So if we're going to have that in there, I think we should try and pop A, B, C, and D back in.
I can communicate with Wally Haley and Peter and see if we can reinsert A, B, C, and D.
Well, if we have to have that additional sentence in there, then that would be my preference.
Okay, what does the rest of the planning commission think? Are they in agreement?
Was their objection, did they reference the higher level regulation?
Well, they're.
That we need to be, you know, the state or
State
federal?
compliance.
Was that their justification, or they, because he is an attorney for XTNet, my understanding?
Right, he obviously has a bias.
Right. So did they say that would violate, or conflict with the federal standard?
He thought it conflicted with the state act,
The state act.
State Act, right. So he wanted to just rely on the language that's in the State Act. So A, B, C, and D, my recollection is those are carryovers from our existing ordinance with some modifications that I put in.
Right.
I think to piggyback off Al's point, I think where it gets confusing is having words like reasonable terms, because then we don't really know, I think we can't really define that, right? And I
Right.
think it puts all of the power into the applicant, and it doesn't really make it a process. It's whatever they really are hoping for, they can make it be reasonable. I think I see Al's point in it for sure, of that it gives a lot of leeway where it's not really clear or defined.
Right.
Well, and there should probably be some kind of a definition of what is deemed as unreasonable. You
Right,
know, I
that's a
think
very
that would.
nebulous term.
That, it is a very, yeah, I mean, unreasonable how, unreasonable to who. I think that clarification could probably, save some aggravation on it, and,
Yeah.
You could,
Well,
you could have a conversation with Peter also, without
Right.
Wally, and say, it's our concern that the way that number 2 here, D2, is written, is that they could make too many changes without getting any permission from anybody, and how can he tighten it up legally? And let him do it without Wally, and then
Yeah.
then throw it back to Wally.
yeah, well, I have to go through Peter. so-
Yeah, and I would say that those were concerns that came up during our conversation that we had, and we looked at both sides of that. I too was sitting in these conversations that we had with Wally and Peter, and we spent a great deal amount of time talking about this specifically, and what does unreasonable mean, and how is that defined? And I believe that the reason that it's written the way that it is just because we're going off of that act, the state act. And so we can't put in any heavier restriction that would somehow contradict the state act, and we're using that verbiage. But just to provide more clarity, those conversations were absolutely what we were discussing at the table when we were looking at this.
But
As part of that
I think it's fair to go back and revisit it and ask if there's leeway there.
And you could also put in a heading before A, B, and C, and D, and say, subject to these following conditions not exceeding the state act, then A, B, C, and D.
or just put in a footnote for, what unreasonable technical limits definition.
We can't define that, and I don't know that that's defined in the state act. That's where that problem is.
And the real reality is the state act supersedes anything that we're putting in
Yeah.
anyway.
Right.
All the
Yeah.
time we're spending, it's
We literally
the
wasted 12
state,
months.
yeah.
Why don't we just read the state act to begin with and just go for that?
We're the stink bug on the microphone.
Was that
There
bug?
the whole time, and I can't flick it off.
I couldn't look at it. It was like wiggling at me.
I slid my LaCroix through.
I gave it a bath.
It had a burial at sea.
I would say I have the same consensus as Al.
Dan, you have any comment? Well, this provision is just about co-location, right? So we're just
Right.
talking about if there's an
Right.
existing
That's
pole
right.
in the vicinity, then the applicant is supposed to just add on to that existing pole, so we don't have two poles that are
Yeah.
too close to each other. I just want to clarify, that's what we're talking about
That's
here.
right.
Yeah. No,
Which we do in at least a couple of cases. We have a couple of those double poles that are right by each other.
What is that, existing non-conforming then? They've been there forever.
Right, well,
Why
yeah.
should they have an attorney on the planning commission?
Betcha.
So do you have any concerns or questions about this point?
Well, we need to comply with the act.
Right.
And so if if adding A, B, and C, and D is out of compliance with the act, then it should be stricken. It seems like that was already determined to be the case, or are you not entirely sure?
Well,
about
that's
that?
what Mr. Haley
We're
suggests.
just,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
just his
And-
suggestion, but it hasn't really been independently reviewed.
Well, Peter agreed with that suggestion.
Yeah.
I think, from my perspective, if I may, I think I think we're gonna be limited on what we can put back in and not, but I don't think it hurts to have Peter revisit this specific spot.
Pardon?
We're gonna be limited about
Yeah.
what we can and cannot put in there, but it makes sense to revisit that
Yeah, I
section with
think it
Peter to get his take on it one more time. I don't know, I think that there could be possibly a modification in there that he could make, so.
I think so.
My thoughts on this is more of, we're not preventing them from co-locating or having them, allowing them to add a second pole. The question, we're basically putting the burden on them to show that they're not able to co-locate.
Right.
So, I mean, we just want to make sure that they've already done their due diligence before throwing another pole up next to an existing pole, that there's a technical reason, there's 4 reasons why they wouldn't actually go ahead and co-locate. It's not an imposition, more of have they done their due diligence on that regard? Because sometimes if you have a kit project, it's easier to follow the kit project where you said do A, B, C, and D. We already know the cost, we know how much everything's done, but it might be an extra burden to be able, for them to, pick the co-location process. And so it's just to make sure that they're considering co-location. I don't see a reason why we can't keep the existing language, because I don't think it prevents them from being I don't know if this is added value for us, and I don't think it's onerous on their side for them to at least let us know, yeah, we've already looked at it, co-location doesn't work, we don't check A, B, C, and D for these reasons.
It most likely they are going to do these things.
Ideally.
In general, they would want to co-locate, I would imagine.
Not
It
necessarily.
didn't sound like it.
They're in the business of putting up poles.
Yeah.
They're like, we're gonna put it here.
It's not in Exton's best interest to not spend more money on the project. It is in T-Mobile's best
right.
interest for them to spend less money. So you've got a conflict of interest going on, and it's in our best interest not to have additional poles up and down one of our roads.
Yeah.
So we have to balance those special interests and still be within the law. And I think that just making sure that, put on the public record that they've gone through and done that check, that it's not possible. Okay, I mean, it's not like we can prevent them from not co-locating, but we do want them to check. That's my take on it.
I mean, do you know, Al, you have some of these on some of your buildings, right? Typically, would one carrier charge, their lease charge to co-locate exceed the cost of building a new structure?
It's different on top of buildings because, there's only so many buildings that are going to be tall enough and in the right location, so.
Right.
That's a really tough one.
Because I would imagine at some point leasing is more appealing than building a new structure for the, for the different carriers.
For the carriers it is.
Right.
Well, I would think at least ask Peter to see if he can tighten
Yeah.
up the language on it.
That seems fair, yeah.
I would agree to that.
Anybody have any other comments or questions?
Al, was that the only one that you had, or?
That was it.
Okay. Okay.
I was gonna just
Pete,
ask
go
real
for
quick.
it.
So just the security with the municipality, any idea if we do that now? Do we have security in escrow for our existing gas units that we have in the village? It's more out of
that I don't
curiosity
know.
than any idea. Well, we always wonder if that was the case, if those are under what terms were those installed? Do we, presumably, there's no financial activity between us and them. They've come, they put them in, and that's where they stay. And I guess we have not had a building permit for anything applied for in the past, in anyone's recollection. Yeah,
I don't think so.
I mean, we haven't had a node put in for, even that's a good question. In my 13 years, there's never been any activity that has ever come to this planning commission regarding nodes being installed. And I do think some nodes have gone in. I mean, they went in the early 2000s, maybe 5 or 6 of them, and I believe 2 more have been installed since then. So I'm just curious if any building permits had been filed. We never got to the building permit stage with this most recent application, right? So,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
They're currently on hold on 13 Mile? Or are they're on hold? Are they proceeding on Inkster?
I think they are. I think I saw something, down near Inkster and 14 that looked like they were starting construction of it a couple of weeks ago.
It's where my house is, I
I
haven't seen
know.
it.
There was some, I don't know.
I know there is a pole at 13 in Inkster.
It was
that's
down near
already-
us. And I saw them working on something, and it was a shorter,
Yeah, it's interesting to watch what, I know in Bloomfield, they voted down some nodes, somehow managed to scare them away, and what happens to the ones in Farmington Hills will be interesting to watch, yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments? So I'd like to go back to the point 13 with striking the power output.
Yeah.
So my understanding is that the Small Cell Act doesn't actually address whether or not a village or a government body has the authority to ask for these reports. It doesn't address that at all.
Doesn't address it, right.
So there's no exclusionary, there's nothing that prevents us. This is not gonna, this annual report would not prevent them from receiving an application. But it would be a requirement for them to give us some sort of a power rating of what's going on, whether or not it's a certification of the compliance for FCC, saying that yes, this has been checked and certified, or within the right realm. But like, how do we know, or as a village, how do we know whether or not what they propose is actually what they're actually executing? And I don't know, my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but if they don't specifically say that we can't request a report on peak monthly power outputs, why can't we ask that? If they don't specifically prohibit us?
Are we really regulating on the basis of peak power outage?
No.
Just report.
It's just a report. We're asking to make sure, just to see what that looks like.
And for what purpose?
Well, we can look to see whether or not they're meeting or exceeding their proposal. Because if they're not, then we can send it to the FCC and ask them to regulate these nodes. I don't know how often. I don't know if they're self-regulating or is actually someone going around and checking these.
And I'm just going to be the devil's advocate
Oh, you're fine.
for a moment. Who at the village is going to read
Right.
the report?
Well, we have a lot of passion.
What are we requiring in our report, and how we don't have a medium for which we would be accepting and reviewing those reports currently?
We have a medium for storing data, and someone could then request that information, right? From the village. I mean, filing
So
cabinet.
you file the report and we just put it away?
If a villager requests to see it, then they could have access to it.
There, obviously, the thing that we learned in this last go-around for cell efforts, past 20 years, everyone wants cell reception. All of a sudden, there's big opposition to putting in cell service at all, and it is based on issues like this. What kind of what kind of radio waves are being transmitted from these towers?
So I'm not arguing that we could obviously house those records in the village office and someone could grab them, but who's going to be responsible for assessing whether or not what's put on an annual report is consistent with what we're seeing or what was proposed
So,
on the cell tower?
Let me go back. I'm going to use an analogy because I think this is helpful. We have water flow in the village, watershed. Everyone's property has water that flows on their property. You come into your home, you realize, I don't want a puddle in this area of my property. So because the village has not been doing a very good job of keeping track of reporting on how water flows in the village, I don't like this culvert here, I'm going to fill it in. where's the record in the village that shows that there was a culvert there for a reason, or the water flow was directed in that direction and not onto your adjacent neighbor's property? Or the challenge that we've run into with village residents is that there's no records that we're keeping even for things that we say you have to provide records for, which is the water flow on your property, how it affects your neighbors. So, and this has been a problem for, 15 years or more, I'm sure. Basically, there's no records. We have no records for the things that we should be tracking to make sure that we can manage disputes between neighbors of, hey, they just put a big berm on my property, now all the water flows on their property, now the water flows back into my backyard. And
Back to my original point, I think that we're talking about two different things. There's something to be said about keeping an annual record, but we're getting these annual reports. We don't review the annual report. We don't go and see if that matches what was the original plan. It's like if we use the water analogy, even if we had that there was a culvert there, if there's no one maintaining and enforcing and keeping that record, then just simply having a record of where culverts should be placed in the village office isn't in itself
but
helping that
you
problem.
missed the point though. Like the point is that a villager says, hey, I'm noticing more water on my property, go to the village, make a request, hey, where's the record of the village water flow plan? Can I look into it? So
That's an excellent example.
And I'll make another analogy, which is we do. I mean, the one thing that I feel like hopefully we're successful at is that residents who are on septic have to submit a certificate every, 5 years, 3 years?
3 years.
So who reviews it?
We do though, we have a
Okay.
process for
You
that.
have a-
That's
so
something
why-
we enforce, that's.
Exactly.
I
So-
think the breakdown between just holding the record and then what we're doing with that record and how we're enforcing it and why we're really asking for it and what the purpose is so different than like
So what's the
septic.
purpose of it?
Of the septic?
Uh-huh.
Well, to ensure that they're well maintained and we monitor that.
Because,
I think that that's irrelevant here.
well, I mean, we make sure that they're functioning so they don't contaminate groundwater and there's not a problem.
Exactly, and that's my
So-
point, is that we can't ensure that these annual reports are accurate.
Why
because that's
can't
not
we
that's-
why can't we allocate something to get an engineer to at least monitor them and go through the report once a year and give us a clearance? So if there is a problem that they see, it's just like doing an annual audit.
I'm actually stepping back from the actual reviewing. Data is cheap to store.
Yeah, it is,
I
but
mean,
I would still, I think that if for some reason, one of those things is malfunctioning and it is
So I'm-
producing harmful, whatever they produce that's harmful,
The
we
reason-
probably want to know about it, not stick our heads in the sand.
The reason why I'm advocating for it is because we've had several villagers come to these meetings expressing concerns with regards to the power output and location near their property. If they are motivated and want to actually monitor it, they will self-police this and make sure that things are going to be done. Storage is cheap. It is very, and it is a single report. I don't see why we need to hire an engineer to do all these checks. I'm just saying, why can't we just store the data, store the report? Because, go ahead.
Well, I didn't mean to interrupt you, just when you're done.
Okay, so the point I wanted to make, so that's the point, is that why not just request it, store the data, and then if a villager feels concerned about it, they can look it up in our village because we have the reports.
Chris, is it outside the village's authority pursuant to the act to require this?
I think that would be Mr. Haley's position,
But it's not necessarily.
that,
Right.
but his position is as follows, that if it's not specified in the act that it's within the authority of the village or of the municipality, then it's outside of your authority.
Because my only concern would be, Stuart, if we get that information and we store it and we don't review it and somebody decides to pursue it and there's a problem, then is that not negligent on our part that we
That's the
didn't?
point that I'm making.
Well, it's also negligent on our part to not, as planning commissioners, to not try and give our residents what they want, what seemed to be, I still think it's a minority voice in the village.
I think it was a very small minority.
Well, they carried the day,
Yeah,
right?
well,
They
that's
they
because-
managed to
Because people
basically, have their way. So, but if you as a commissioner, I at least, I've heard them, right? I've heard them say, and I don't agree either, but I also follow this issue pretty closely, and I know like in Denmark, they're doing things that are pretty aggressive about not allowing 5G transmission. So it's like, this might be a service to our residents to do something like this. I mean, and yes, will they ever do it if we ask for it? Probably not. They'll probably never give us a report, right? They'll just ignore this. But I also say that we're kind of like showing some of our residents that we were listening to them when they said, we're concerned about power output and we're concerned about what these radio frequencies might have effect on us, so.
And I think that Chris provided us with information that it's not just in Denmark. There are states or, certainly cities in
School
the
districts,
US that
yeah.
are not allowing it.
No.
So real quick, I want to exercise good habits of not involving myself. So like, by all means, feedback, very much welcome. So I'm just trying to weigh in based off of previous conversations of council to help provide guidance on this point, which is what we're expecting back from this is not having to make a distinction or do additional research on what is permissible under the law. And so the only thing that I would ask is that we don't get that other states, Denmark, may be on the cutting edge of things that aren't necessarily supported by the authorities that we have as a body, right? And so really taking careful consideration that when we received this back, it was with the understanding of we are within the bounds of what we can actually do from our authority standpoint. And then the other thing is just considering what authority we would actually have. Like if we get one of these reports, we determine that they're outside of their frequency, what can we do? Right, and is there authority under the state in order to do that, to levy a fine, to levy some type of judicial relief, right, like a declaratory injunction or something to that effect? So that's kind of the direction council would be looking for on this.
Yeah.
Well, I guess then, Chris, the question we'd have with the attorneys, are we prohibited from requesting this?
Well, I would have to go back and ask that question.
Right. And
But in the
if
vein of what trustee was saying, it's my understanding that if you found there was a violation, it would not be within your authority, the village's authority, to take action and say, okay, we're going to go after you.
Of course,
It
of course.
would be within
No,
your
I mean,
authority to
these-
say to the FCC, maybe.
The harm that this would, the only time you would ever have legal action on this, in my opinion, is if it became an issue. If we ask, there's no harm in us asking for it, but if they say we don't want to give it, then if they say, we're not going to provide you these reports.
Well, I have to find out whether we can even require it.
Yes, I would say that would be certainly fair, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I can ask that question.
But then it's a question of, are we, as commissioners, doing a service to our residents by doing something like this?
Well, you can only do as much service as is allowed by law.
And that's right. That's why I did feel that would be the first thing we need to clarify.
Right.
And, we never want litigation, but, we have many codes on the book where they will never be an issue unless someone decides to hire a lawyer. And then it's very easy to make it go away just by not standing the ground on that,
I'm not sure that we have that many laws on the books that are like that.
I would hope we don't, but, we do try to, we can't always know in great depth whether our ordinances
Our
are.
task tonight is not to take any action, I believe. It's just to have discussion. So I think we've given Chris a couple of questions to go back and say, these are things that we have some concerns on. Can we can we, this paragraph be amended? Can this paragraph be amended? And if we hear the answer from our attorney that it's no, then we don't need to discuss it further. And if the answer is yes, if Peter says, yeah, you can do this, then he and Wally get on the phone and find some acceptable language between the two of them.
I just want to make a point, though. I think about just from community background, just because we get something, we see something, and yes, there may be an error of negligence if we don't say something. How bad would you feel, though, like if you're a human being saying to your neighbor, we know something's going on, and we're not gonna, we don't want to find out because we don't want to be responsible. I don't want us to ever think of it like that. All of the big issues that have happened in terms of people going to court over things about, like Flint water and all of those pieces, do you really want to step your hands back and be like, we don't want to make sure our neighbors are healthy? So I think for me, it's just looking at it like, people said this. I want to make sure that we're at least giving them opportunity to have somewhere to go for the information, because I think that part, when we talk about transparency, is important. I think we just need to say, this is the information, and if, for some reason it does come up that something is nefarious or they're going over, then I think from there it's, okay, now what do we do? What is within our rights? But I don't think stepping back and saying, we don't want this information because we just don't want to be negligent, I think is a disservice to your neighbors and community.
Yeah. And I will say, corporations are notorious for having legal statutes for their company, or company policies where they say we will not keep emails past 6 months or 3 months or whatever legally they're allowed to have as a maximum time limit, depending on the type of service it is. And having the village store the data isn't, it is cheap for us to do. Drop it in a folder, it's PDF folder, every year. It's a file a year. 12 pages.
Well, I'll check into it, definitely.
So,
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments, questions about it? Thank you, Chris. I think you did a good job of going through and highlighting the questions that they had and making modifications. The fact that there are only two items that we discussed is actually pretty good considering the number of changes you had to make. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Next topic is for pathways. So last month, we had included in our packet a list of all the 8 different pathway locations as well as a discussion on it, correct?
No, I don't believe we had. I don't think we had.
We didn't do pathways last month.
I don't
But you-
believe we had anything in the packet.
You had 8 pages that PDF I forwarded you for last month. It was a map of 8 different locations, of several different locations we've looked at in the past for regards to pathways.
Yeah, I don't.
No,
I don't think it was last.
The map we had last month was for the fences.
Yeah, it was just a line item for discussion, and I don't believe it was a fairly, well, we got out by 9 o'clock last time, but we didn't go into depth on it. I was hoping we could do it tonight.
Okay, well, I thought we had the. Let's talk.
You're basically talking about the HRC, Hubbard and Clark's? Okay.
Yep. Should have
You can
been.
describe what it is, I guess, unless you had specific. I think many of us have seen that.
Well, I think if it. Let's just talk about it next month. I'll put it back I'll resend it to you to put it in the packet, please.
Can I ask just what is council's expectation of us with pathways going forward? I don't think do we have a to-do other than discuss it really, or plan?
So,
I
yeah,
would
feel
just
free.
want-
Yeah, I can
Any
speak to
clarity
it.
would be great.
This one it's an extremely fair question, just the ebb and flow of what's happened. So Pete, you can probably provide context of when the Hubble Roth and Clark work was done, but it was years ago. And nothing was actually taken to completion. It was kind of piecemeal discussions. Then it kind of came up to council. They started to talk about what were some of the feasible pathways. I believe that Bill for a while was pursuing one of them, and I don't know where the current status of that is. And so I would love, just from an expectation, to level set and say, where are we currently at? Let's reset the focus. And then from there, I can take that back to council and say, what do we actually want to, like, here is a very clear where we're at, the work that's been done. Now let's give direction back to the planning commission to be able to say directly what the expectation is. I do think that my guess, and where I stand on it, and I think where we previously were going with the, well, I guess the other thing is we have 3 new council members, 2 of the, I guess, 1 incumbent, 2 new council members. So I think it'll be good to re-facilitate that conversation to get their expectations as well. But it was, what are the actual viable paths? What are our avenues? Is there any land that we don't have to get easement or yeah, I guess get an easement or buy, you know, do any expenditure of resources on in order to get. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
And I think I asked Meg, but maybe Dana might have it. I think at some point, because Kathy and I went out to the Irving one, I think, and
I've been there
Stewart's
too.
wife as well, because I know there was talk about cleaning that up. But we didn't have the easement information that used to be there, like where it was, and it's been like, I think, buried along in all of the old pathway files, if that could be if anyone could find that. I looked for it myself in the packets from our committee, and I couldn't find
They're in
it
the-
anywhere, and so if we had it, it would be great.
Plat maps are right under Bill Dinnan's desk in there.
I couldn't figure out the start end easement point, like it just wasn't clear. So if we could
Okay.
do that in order, I think the idea was that might be a good starting point, because there is space there that could be cleaned up, but we couldn't do anything with it if we don't know what is available.
Was it surveyed?
Yeah,
Their
so
markers?
it's the April 21 Planning Commission meeting.
Way back.
Yes, so there was an attachment I sent in November, yeah, that I wanted to make sure went to
Right.
planning. It talks about the different locations, it's got a picture of each one. Please, could you send it out tomorrow, if you wouldn't mind, to planning? Have a look at it. It is the different locations. Some of these locations are connections that are recommended, but some of them also is property that the village actually owns already, which we could add pathways to, for example, or improve walkability. So Irving Road has the path on the north side. No, I'm sorry, hold on.
Colony Hill,
Colony Hill,
Captain's
yeah.
Lane, and then Irving Road
Irving Road
extends-
on the west.
It continues
West side, right?
Basically, it goes right up the driveway of the house,
South
as
side.
if,
It says no trespassing or whatever it is.
Yeah.
as if Irving, which it did at one time, continue right up that hill and connect Colony Hill and Captain's Lane.
Yep. So those are village-owned easements.
I think it's the only one that we're certain about.
Well, there's also the one just from the baseball fields going, let's see, I'm trying to remember my orientation,
Dun-
hold on.
Up and down the hill.
That's
South.
west, so on this, yeah, south side of,
To the court, Drummond Court?
Where I'd suggested we put the dog park.
Yeah.
Yes.
no, this is actually further down, this is, so dog parks, you're talking about dog park, oh, yeah, right across, yes, exactly. where you're
It's
putting
right
I
it.
mean,
Cemetery,
we,
yeah.
we own that, the village owns that land, so.
And
So-
there's a trail, it's just.
Yeah, it's a nice
It's
trail,
just
yeah.
not so easy to traverse.
But I think at the very least, let's look at the ones that are on the goals from HRC, the ones that a village village does not have ownership of, and then also the ones the pathways that we do have, we do own. So
Is there another one that might connect River to German Mill?
there is part of the way, but from river to the creek we don't.
It's about 5 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, is if there's anything that's not covered by HRC either, just from being familiar with the terrain that you have recommendations on, we're clearly open to that as well. I know 2 of you lived in a landlocked area. And so you know your neighbors, and at the end of the day, if it requires us to make some type of financial obligation or just having conversations about potential amenable neighbors and what it would take, you guys are gonna have the perspective and we'd be open to it, so.
I also think if we're planning on having a pathway discussion, we should have a HRC here. The study that was done identifying the 8 pathways invoked a lot of opinions from those engineers about how they decided on those pathways and how they were chosen. And I think that some time has passed and the decisions that were made there, it might be good to get the background on that and get their current opinion of what's viable and what your best options are moving forward, or some of the other obstacles that they've seen after completing that study. And so I would be happy to invite Nancy from HRC to be at your next meeting. She's probably the best person to offer opinions and ask questions on pathways.
I think that'd be great, yeah.
Stuart, once we get this information, what are you hoping from us to bring to the next meeting so we have a task?
I'd like you to familiarize yourself with at least those 8 locations, but that's primary, but secondarily, I'd like it if you would take a chance to walk up to the Apple Tree, Colony Hill, that area through
Have any of us not been there?
Have any of you not done that before? Have you done
I
that
did,
walk?
I did it a couple weeks ago
Yeah.
with my grandkids. It was really fun.
You've had to walk.
So it is.
I'm sure I've walked.
It's walkable, just, it's not actually in that bad a condition as it was made out to be.
Yeah.
So it is
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah. No, it's definitely.
And then
walkable.
secondarily, tertiarily, those of you, I know that several of you live in in the landlocked areas, but if you've looked over when you look it over, you'll see the 8 locations, but keep in mind areas that might have been missed. And if you feel like there's an area that's missed, so when HRC comes to visit, we can at least address, talk to them with some knowledge of those areas.
I know there's an area off of Bloomington that goes right down to Haverford.
So let's talk
It
about.
was in the backyard of a house that I sold, and they're like, oh yeah, everybody uses that
I'm pretty
path.
sure it's on there.
Yeah.
David, do you still have the map we did? We did like that would be great if one of us could have that. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, sorry, this is a really good update for you all as well. So we previously had a couple of committees, subcommittees of council that were probably a little outdated, not really used. And so we combined it into an infrastructure subcommittee. So again, for the interest of that, like dealing with the pathways and whatnot will be really helpful to kind of for the guidance that you're looking for that, but as we begin to pull in these resources, we'll share them with you all as well. But yeah, I do have a couple of those maps, and I'll circulate whatever, because I went through, Pete, you had previously provided me like a packet of information of just like whatever documents we had, and then I tried to cut out some of the duplicates and circulate that to the group. So I'll look at what's been circulated to you all and figure out whether or not that paper will be helpful or if it'll just be more confusing.
Thank you. Yeah, that'd be great. And then, Pete, with all the great work you had helped with for the Pickering Barn initiatives that were going on, I think we gained a lot of insight as to how we can do public funding and how we can go reach out to pay for some of these worthwhile activities, and that we also saw evidence that the Oakland County as well as the state encourages walkability within the state and the county. And we saw several different communities that benefited from grant money to actually execute on these activities. So we're definitely going to be bringing that up.
So if I can pick up on that a little bit, I do think that's what this will boil down to. You know, if we can get Chris to start working on our recommendation form, and that, you know, we identify these locations, which a lot of us, you know, have spent a lot of time looking at, and I think we know mostly, with the exception of the one I just mentioned, that it will then turn into, you know, I do think, you know, something we never had with Pickering is really good visioning, like actual people whose profession it is to create walkways and linkages, so that, you know, what would happen with Pickering is, you know, they wanted to give us $250,000. they were calling me, we want to give you this money. And then they said, well, you guys aren't ready for it. So there's an element of, I think if we're serious, there's two aspects. One is talking to neighbors and getting some easements through these. But then even then, we need to have fundraising efforts and to be ready to write for grants. So that we can pay for them. And there's grant opportunities out there, even now.
And I would say when Nancy's here, talking about funding and grant, especially as it's specific to this area, she's a great resource for that. She is writing these grants in other communities, and there are certain obstacles with the 8 paths that we've proposed to the funding that has been previously available. And so if we're in these early stages of planning, I think it'd be really important to talk to Nancy about what she sees as blocking us from being recipients of that funding, because that was one of the obstacles in the past.
Sure.
And see if it's something that we can adjust then in our overall plan.
And Nancy is who?
Nancy's our HRC representative. She's basically
Okay.
the engineer for the city. She
Yeah.
would have worked, she's very familiar with the 8 pathways. She did all of the work on the pathway that we were looking to develop. Looked at the different ways of the easements last year that we had brought through. Nancy did all of that. She spoke to all the residents and got figures for what those easements would cost. Nancy had done all of that work.
Right.
So she's very familiar with the project, and like I said, has a unique perspective and definitely can point out some of your obstacles right away.
Does she have a CV of successfully executing pathway projects
Yes.
with other villages? Could she just have at least a list of a few grant projects that they had done in the past? It doesn't have to give us the details of everything was done,
Yep.
but just kind of help us understand what kind of work the HRC had done in the past for other villages and how successful they were with writing grants.
Well, I
and things
can't
like
guarantee they were villages, but other
Or
municipalities.
municipalities, yes.
She's very familiar with pathways, and
Okay.
Nancy's been in municipal engineer for 25 years.
Great, thank you.
That's great. I would also say the aspect of it that is less money driven initially is talking to our neighbors about what a great thing this would be for the village to be able to have some of these easements, which would involve, private residents, allowing for easements, how we could make it attractive to them, and especially, Sarah, you and Dan, who have said,
We've said it, we've talked to our neighbors,
Right.
yeah.
And it's those key people who in those key locations, if they feel like a village is behind this and would love it, it would be a great thing. And if they can see a way of getting some new landscaping out of it, it has great potential. So those are my 2 observations.
Okay.
Yeah, the other thing is that, to that last point about having talked to neighbors already, if you have one pathway that's ready to go, don't hold it up with the 8. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Okay, well, it sounds like we'll have a much more fulfilling conversation next month. I appreciate the homework that we're gonna have to do, but I appreciate your time for doing it. That's the last agenda point item, so,
January 15th?
yeah, so another motion to,
You want to motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor? Aye.